Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know many of you choose these videos to relax and easily drift off to sleep. Before you slip into your dreams, could you do me a small favor? Leave a quick interaction and let us know where you're watching this and at what time. Now, let's begin tonight's horror stories. I'm Katie, 14, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, with my sister Elise, who's 15. It was a Friday, late July, and the heat was absolutely brutal. Mom was working the afternoon shift at the hospital. Dad was off on some business trip, so it was just me and Elise holding down the fort. "Hey Katie, wanna go snag a free Slurpee?" Elise called out from the living room. 7-Eleven is running promos today. I rolled out of bed and slid into my sandals, jean shorts, and a pink tank top. Plenty for this kind of weather. Elise was already waiting by the door, keys in hand. The 7-Eleven was just a couple blocks from our house, like a 10-minute walk, tops. Phoenix streets were dead quiet in the afternoon. "Don't go overboard with the snacks," Elise warned as we stepped into the store. The little bell above the door jingled, and the blast of cold AC felt like heaven. The guy behind the counter gave us a nod. We knew him pretty well from all the candy runs. I made a beeline for the Slurpee machine, grabbed a medium cup, and went all in on strawberry. Elise filled up a large one, mixing cherry and blueberry. While she was still messing with the lid, I drifted over to the snack aisle. Bright orange Doritos bags jumped out at me from the shelf, right next to rows of Haribo gummies and stacks of Hershey bars. I was doing some quick math in my head, figuring out if I had enough change for another pack of M&Ms, when a voice suddenly came from right next to me. "Hey there, pretty girl." I turned around. There was a woman standing nearby, brown hair pulled back, wearing a white blouse. In her arms was a little dog, kind of fawn-colored, panting like crazy. "Hey," I said, trying to be polite. "Do you like dogs? His name's Peanut," she said, holding him out to me. Peanut licked his nose and stuck his tongue out, looking up at me with those big round eyes. "Aw, yeah, he's adorable," I said, reaching out to pet his head. His fur was super soft and warm. "What's your name?" she asked. "Katie." "Katie, could you do me a quick favor? I really need to use the bathroom, but they don't let dogs in the store. Would you mind watching Peanut for a minute, just right outside?" I glanced over at Elise. She was still by the Slurpee machine, back turned, totally focused. "Sure, I can do that," I nodded. "Thank you so much. I'll be fast." She handed me Peanut. He was lighter than I thought, maybe 3 pounds, tops. We stepped outside. I realized I never asked her name. The sun was still beating down, hot as ever. I stood under the awning in the shade, gently stroking Peanut's fur. The dog just lay there quietly in my arms. "Katie, come here for a sec," the woman called out from near the parking lot. I blinked. Wait, when did she come outside? She was standing next to a blue van, side door wide open. There was a tall guy standing beside her. "Come here, Katie. I want to show you something," she said, waving me over. I started walking toward the parking lot, still holding Peanut tight. But the second I got close to the van, the guy grabbed my left arm. "Get in the car," he snapped. His voice was rough. His hand clamped down on my arm, huge, calloused fingers digging into my skin. I gasped and dropped Peanut. The little dog bolted. I tried to yank my arm away, but he was way stronger than me. "No, let me go," I screamed. "I said get in the car." He started dragging me toward the open van. Inside, I saw a nasty gray carpet and rope. "Katie, let go of my sister." Elise's voice cut through the air like a whip. She came running out of the store, her Slurpee flying out of her hand and exploding on the pavement, ice and soda everywhere. "Help! He's trying to kidnap her!" she screamed. The clerk came running out of the store, another guy right behind him. Over by the gas pumps, someone jumped out of a red car. The man let go of me instantly. I dropped to the ground, scraping both my knees on the pavement. "Let's go," the woman shouted. They both dove into the car. The engine roared to life. It backed out fast, tires screeching as it tore down the street. I caught a glimpse of the license plate, Arizona, and the numbers 736, but I couldn't remember the exact order. Elise threw her arms around me. I was shaking all over, heart pounding like crazy. The clerk pulled out his phone and called 911. "You okay?" he asked, his face full of worry. I couldn't answer. My knees were stinging and bleeding, and I felt completely out of it. Elise didn't say anything either. She just kept holding on to me, breathing fast. About 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers took our statements. They asked me to describe the guy, the woman, and the car. They said it looked like a planned kidnapping. Mom showed up not long after Elise called her. She hugged us tight and cried. Dad booked the earliest flight back to Phoenix. That night, at dinner, I still couldn't stop shaking. I kept seeing the guy's cold eyes and feeling his hand crushing my arm. Elise sat beside me, holding my hand the whole time. "From now on," Mom said, "you girls do not go anywhere alone, and you always tell us where you're going." I nodded. I got it now. The world wasn't as safe as I'd thought. The next morning, the 7-Eleven clerk called my mom. He'd found Peanut wandering near the store, hungry, thirsty, and totally lost. Poor little guy. He'd been part of their plan, and they didn't even care what happened to him. "Can we keep him, Mom?" I asked, while she was telling us about the call. Mom looked at Dad, then Elise. "If no one comes forward after a week, we'll make it official," she said. A week passed. No one called. No one claimed him. The police checked. Peanut didn't have a chip. They said he was probably just used as bait, so we adopted him. Just like that, Peanut became part of our family. Now every night when I cuddle Peanut close, I think about how one good thing came out of that awful day. This little dog got a new home, and I got a little buddy who'll always remind me just how lucky I was to get away. My name's Sarah. I'm 23, and I work the night shift at a 7-Eleven out in the suburbs of Arlington. Most of the folks who come in that late are truckers, or people driving in from who knows where just to grab gas and some caffeine. That morning, it was around 6. The sky was starting to lighten up. I was at the back, counting the cash in the safe, last thing I had to do before clocking out. Then I heard the bell over the door. First customer of the day. He was tall, with a thick beard. "Morning, large coffee?" he said. "How do you take it? Sugar? Cream?" "Just black." I stopped counting and grabbed a cup, moving quick. He smelled like diesel fuel and stale sweat. I cringed just a little as I turned to pour the coffee. Through the front window, I caught sight of a big rig parked outside. Yeah, definitely a trucker. I handed him the coffee. He dropped some change on the counter but didn't leave. Just stood there, sipping, eyes drifting around the store. "You working alone?" That caught me off guard. I tried to play it cool. "Not really. My coworker's coming in soon." He gave a slow nod, eyes still locked on me. It isn't safe for a girl working nights like this. He sipped his coffee again, still watching me. "Hey, you know how to get to Vegas? I think I'm lost." I pointed to the map we had taped up on the wall. My hands were starting to sweat, but he didn't even look at the map, just kept staring. "How old are you?" he asked. Something in me said not to answer. "You look really young. Still in college?" He stepped in closer to the counter. I could see the stains on his shirt now, and the body odor hit me harder. "Where do you live? Far from here?" My heart started pounding. I instinctively stepped back, reaching under the counter, feeling around for my phone. He smiled. That kind of smile that makes your skin crawl. "Hey now, don't be scared. I'm just making conversation." He planted both hands on the counter and leaned in. "You got a boyfriend? Someone picking you up?" I didn't say anything, just stared out the front, praying someone would pull in. It felt like being locked in a cage with something dangerous. "Why aren't you answering me?" He stepped closer, just one table between us now. "I'm just trying to get to know you." I took a shaky breath. "Sir, there are security cameras in here." I pointed up toward the ceiling, hoping that would make him back off, He glanced up, then gave a lazy smirk. I didn't do anything. He drained the last of his coffee, then chucked the cup at the trash can so hard I flinched. Hey, you drive to work? Or someone drop you off? Still no answer from me. I couldn't hide the fear on my face anymore. He started walking down one of the aisles, but his eyes never left mine. You know, I like young girls. I glanced at the door. It was too far. He could easily cut me off if I ran. Let's go get coffee somewhere else. I know a quiet little spot. The way he looked at me, the way he said it, the way he just stood there, casually blocking the exit. It felt planned. All of it. Then he started acting weird, pressing both hands to his face, grinning like a little kid. I froze. My heart was hammering in my chest. Then he started whistling, his head bobbing side to side like some drunk. "Sarah!" he called out, all giddy. I glanced down at my name tag in panic. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my phone under the counter. And then he started counting down. 10, 9, 8. His voice got lower with each number. Slower, but creepier. And then, like fate throwing me a lifeline, I heard an engine pull up outside. My heart damn near leapt out of my chest. It was Mike, the mechanic. He worked over at the plant down the road. He always stopped in for coffee before his shift. The second I saw Mike, the weight on my chest lifted. I called out, "Mike!" and shot him a "please help me" look. He caught on fast. He glanced at me, then clocked the trucker standing in the middle of the store. "Sarah," he said loud and clear. The guy turned to him, sizing him up. Mike was shorter, but built like a tank with tattoos and scars on his arms. The kind of guy you don't mess with. "You know this girl too?" he asked. "I'm a regular," Mike said calmly. "What about you?" "Just stopped in for some coffee." But he wasn't going anywhere. He just stood there, arms locked in front of him, still blocking the damn exit. Mike stepped up to the counter, right between me and him. "Same coffee as always," he said, then turned to face the guy. The whole store went dead quiet. The guy didn't move. He sneered and gave Mike a once-over like he thought he had the upper hand. Then, real slow, he reached into his pocket. Just enough so we could see the handle of a knife. My blood ran cold. Mike saw it too. His expression changed in an instant, eyes like ice. "I'd think twice before doing something stupid," Mike said. The guy raised an eyebrow. "Or what? What are you gonna do?" He stroked the knife handle like he was itching to escalate. The tension was thick enough to cut with a blade. I choked up, trembling as I watched the two men face off. Mike had his fists clenched, eyes locked and dead serious, completely dialed in. The tension hung in the air for a few more seconds. Then finally, the driver slowly pulled his hands out of his pockets and started backing away. "All right, just this once," he muttered. He turned and walked toward the door. Mike didn't move, just kept his cold stare fixed on the guy. At the door, the driver stopped. He turned back, gave me this eerie little smile. "Bye, Sarah. I'll be back." The sound of his truck engine faded into the distance, and I collapsed into the chair behind the counter, my whole body shaking like a leaf. Mike came over, his voice soft. "You okay, Sarah?" I nodded, but the tears wouldn't stop. Relief mixed with fear, spilling over. "Thank you, Mike. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if you hadn't walked in." I didn't call the cops. I just wanted that day to disappear. After that, Mike and I got a lot closer. We've been in this kind of interesting stage. He swings by the store a few times a day now, and I still work there. Only now, I keep a taser and a can of pepper spray under the counter. Hopefully, I'll never have to use them. I'm Oscar, 30 years old. I've been working at this 7-Eleven for 3 years now. My shift that day was from 4 p.m. to midnight, usually the busiest time. I had about 30 minutes left on my shift. I was counting money in the register when I heard the bell chime, signaling a customer. A tall man walked in, wearing a baseball cap that hid half his face. I politely greeted him and asked if he needed any help, but the man didn't answer. just quietly walked along the aisles. I went back to what I was doing, occasionally glancing up to make sure he wasn't doing anything weird. After about 5 minutes, he brought a bottle of whiskey, a pack of cigarettes, and some snacks to the counter. When I was ringing up the items, I could feel his heavy breath on my face. The strong smell of alcohol and cigarettes hit my nose, mixed with a sour body odor. He stood pressed against the counter, so close I could count every stubby beard hair on his chin. I told him the total, trying to keep my voice normal. He slowly pulled out his wallet, dragging the motion out as if trying to stall, then handed me a $50 bill. When I gave him his change, his rough fingers brushed against my palm. I quickly pulled my hand back. Just then, he looked up, and his face became clear. "Remember me, buddy?" I froze, staring at every feature on his face. Suddenly, memories flooded back. A week ago, I had caught him harassing a girl. I immediately called the police to help. Before the police took him away, he threatened to come back and get revenge on me. At the time, I only felt a little annoyed, not too concerned. Back to facing him in that moment. The blood in my veins felt like it was freezing. I didn't show my panic. I looked at the register and kept working. And then his expression changed. The corner of his mouth slowly curled into a disgusting grin. I tried to stay calm and politely answered to get him to move on. "I see a lot of customers, so I can't remember all of them." He sneered, "You're the jerk who called the cops last week. How dare you butt into my business?" I didn't know how to react. The store was empty, no other customers, and my coworker was in the back storeroom. My hand slowly moved under the counter, where the alarm button was. "If you don't have anything else, I'm going to continue my work." But he didn't budge after my words. His right hand was still on the counter, but his left hand had slipped inside his jacket. My gut told me that wasn't a good sign. I tried to reach for the alarm button, but he was faster. His large hand reached over the counter, gripped my wrist tightly, and squeezed hard. His eyes wide, he leaned close to me and growled a warning. "Don't try anything sneaky." I tried to think calmly. The landline phone was at the other end of the counter, about 6 feet away from me. The security cameras were recording, but no one was actively watching. I knew I had to save myself. He chuckled. "That girl was my girlfriend. Because of you, I was locked up for a week." I argued with him about his bad treatment of that girl. That was the biggest mistake of my life. In a flash, his hand pulled a handgun from his jacket, the click as he cocked it. My heart stopped for a beat. His eyes gleamed with hatred, his face contorted with rage. From the words spewing from his mouth, I knew this was a violent and controlling man. The landline phone at the end of the counter was my only salvation at that moment. I yanked my arm out of his grasp and lunged for the phone. Only one thought was in my head. I needed to call for help. He was as fast as a predator, his large body leaping over the counter with incredible strength, kicking away the chair blocking his path. His heavy weight slammed into me, pinning me to the floor. A crack echoed. The air was forced out of my lungs. I gasped like a stranded fish, trying to breathe. I struggled wildly, but it was like an ant trying to push a boulder. His hand tightened around my neck, while his other hand still held the gun. The cold barrel pressed against my temple. Blood rushed to my brain, my vision blurring from lack of oxygen. I whispered pleas, but they only came out as faint gasps. He laughed with amusement. He was enjoying the power of holding someone's life in his hands. My body slowly gave up. This must be it, I thought. Suddenly, a loud shout, "You bastard!" immediately followed by the sound of shattering glass. It was Max, my coworker. The man roared, immediately let go of me, and recoiled. I gasped, taking in as much oxygen as I could. Max ran over, pulled me up, and we both scrambled into the storeroom, locking the door. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The man knew he couldn't escape, so he rushed outside with the gun in his hand. A tense shootout ensued. We huddled in the storeroom, covering our ears because of the deafening gunshots. A few minutes later, everything went silent. Max and I, following police orders, moved outside. The man lay motionless on the street with blood and a few bullet wounds. I sank to my knees, my body still trembling. Max sat beside me. "It's over, Oscar. You're safe now." I looked at Max and smiled, letting out a long breath. Thank God I had just escaped death's door. I understood that I could have lost my life just for doing the right thing, but if I could go back to that day again, I would still choose to help that girl.
I'm Elise, 31 years old. I live with my fiance in an apartment in the city center. I'm a psychologist working in a private psychiatric clinic. One morning, I was scheduled to meet with a girl who exhibited severe anxiety symptoms. She is a final year university student and met me in a state of extreme panic. It happened after she witnessed a lecturer end his life right in the classroom with a pen. She continuously cried, unable to concentrate on what I was saying. Noticing her unstable condition, I quickly turned around to prepare some sedatives. The moment I turned back, she looked at me with dazed eyes, but had a bright smile on her face. She was firmly holding a pen in her hand and drew a deep line that extended from her temple down to her neck. She collapsed onto the floor, but continued to look at me with wide open eyes and a stiff smile. I was terrified, not knowing what else to do but scream. Security was present, but she had already stopped breathing. I was summoned by the police to investigate her death, but all I could provide them was that I couldn't even pronounce clearly. Since that horrific event, I have always felt someone watching me, even when I was at home. When I opened the bedroom door, I was startled to see a figure on the bed, looking at me with a bright smile. When I turned the lights on in the room, that dark figure had vanished. Perhaps I couldn't forget the image and smile of that girl. The next day, I still couldn't concentrate on my work. I stood up and walked to the window. Just as I pulled the curtains, a strange girl was standing under the hospital grounds staring at me. I was sure that she was looking at me with a big, bright smile. I took a deep breath and looked again, but that girl had disappeared. Walking down the hospital corridor, I passed by a male patient's room. The door was open. I paused. It seemed he was acting strangely. He was sitting on the bed, smiling widely, his eyes wide open and unblinking. I initiated a conversation with him, but he didn't react at all. I felt fear, hatred, and was haunted by that smile. I screamed loudly and suddenly grabbed his collar, demanding that he stop immediately. My agitation frightened the other patients and nurses nearby. 2 nurses quickly took me back to my room and called the chief doctor. The chief doctor feared I would have psychological issues. He granted me a 2-week leave to stabilize my stresses. I followed the chief doctor's advice, even though there were many patients needing me. While I was talking with the chief doctor, a panicked nurse rushed into the room. The man I had grabbed by the collar had not made it. When we arrived at the scene, he was lying face down on the bed, facing the door. At the foot of the bed, thick red liquid was oozing out and trailing down. He was still smiling, blood streaming heavily from his head, yet it seemed only I could see that smile. I took a leave of absence at home for a while, per the chief doctor's suggestion. My boyfriend had comforted me a lot. The next day when I was home alone, I was sure I saw a dark figure sitting on the living room sofa. I approached with a vase firmly in my hand. The atmosphere was tense until the alarm suddenly went off. I jumped, and the vase in my hand fell and shattered. Looking back, the dark figure on the sofa had also vanished. I took a few seconds to gather myself, then ran to turn off the alarm, but couldn't. I called the security guard to report the issue with the alarm. When I looked back at the alarm's location, a dark figure with a bright smile quickly lunged toward me and then vanished. I fell to the floor, my body frozen. The phone on the dining table kept ringing. I sat up to answer. It was the building security. They said I triggered the alarm a few minutes ago, but couldn't contact me, and they were at the apartment. I quickly explained the situation to the guard. I could see the skepticism in his gaze. The guard left, and I sat for a long time to collect myself until I received a call from my nephew. The boy invited me to his 9th birthday party tomorrow night, and I immediately accepted. I went out to pick a birthday gift, also to lift my spirits. Entering the toy store, I chose to buy the newly released remote-controlled airplane. Looking at the advertisement, I found the smiles of the models there to be truly frightening. I felt my mood about to collapse, so I quickly left. That evening when my boyfriend returned home, he smiled and approached me, but I instinctively reacted harshly, rushing to slap him hard across the face. He stared at me, his mouth forming that creepy smile. I cursed and continuously hit him until he managed to control me. I broke down in tears, apologizing profusely. After dinner, I asked my boyfriend about our little cat. I hadn't seen it since I went to buy the birthday gift. We searched through every nook and cranny in the house, but couldn't find it. At my nephew's birthday party, everything went normally. I was very happy to see my twin sister again. When it came time to unwrap gifts, the boy selected my present to open first, but inside was not a toy airplane. It was the corpse of my cat. The boy looked disappointed and burst into tears. My actions ruined the party. I went upstairs with my sister to talk privately. She advised me to focus on treating my mental health first, instead of being a psychologist for other patients. I recalled a story from 18 years ago. I came home from school and received a cold look from my father before he walked away. When I ran into the room to find my mother, I was shocked to see her lying on the bed in a soaked red dress, clinging to her frail body. My mother said she was okay and reached out to me. She looked at me and smiled, a very bright smile. I stood there watching my mother lose her life without crying, without any reaction. That was the most terrible time of my life.
I am Julia, 22 years old, a girl who used to live life to the fullest with endless parties. Music, alcohol, and loud laughter were the things that made me feel free, unbound. I have many friends, but most of them are just people I've met through a few parties. I didn't care much because to me, life was about enjoying every moment, until that fateful night that changed everything. That day, I accepted an invitation to a party from Richard, a guy I had just met the day before at the bar. He had a dazzling smile and a gaze that knew how to capture attention. Richard offered, and I did not hesitate to accept. I was used to invitations like that, no need to think too much about it. My memories after that shattered, as if someone had turned off the switch in my mind. The last thing I remember is holding a cocktail, with the thumping music making it nearly impossible to hear anyone's conversation. A wave of dizziness hit, and then everything went dark. I woke up with a headache pounding like a hammer. A burning sensation ran all over my body, as if every muscle had been tortured. When I opened my eyes, I found myself curled up in a bush, trying to look closely at my surroundings, which were by the side of a highway. The cold wind sliced into my skin, making me shiver. I raised my hand and slapped my head a few times to wake myself up. Looking at my body, the short dress was dirty and torn to pieces. No phone, no purse, nothing at all. I sat up, my body trembling and my mind spinning. While being in a state of panic, I couldn't recall what had happened. A terrible feeling rose in my chest, a flood of questions about what I had been through, what horrible things had happened. All those questions spiraled deep into my mind, but there were no answers. I stood up, staggering toward the highway, with a faint hope of finding someone to help. Standing by the roadside, I waved at the first car that passed. Luckily, the sleek black car slowly came to a stop. The window rolled down, and a young man looked at me with a curious gaze, asking what I needed help with. I quickly ran over, almost begging him to give me a ride. The man gave me a brief, evaluating look, then smiled lightly and agreed. I sighed in relief, feeling that I still had a bit of luck left. But just a few minutes after the car started moving, I realized I'd made a mistake. He asked a few questions, and I naively told him everything about my situation. No one knew I was here, no money or phone, no way to protect myself. He suddenly fell silent for a moment, then burst into laughter, a laugh that sent a chill down my spine. "You have nice breasts. Hey, what color is your underwear?" His voice was slippery and disgusting. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought I could hear it in my chest. I stared at him, and he reached out and placed his hand lightly on my knee, his fingers sliding in a sickly slow motion. Instinct surged within me. Without thinking, I forcefully pushed his hand away and pulled the handbrake abruptly. The car jerked to a stop, the tires screeching against the road. I opened the door and rushed straight out. He shouted loudly behind me, but I didn't dare look back. On the side of the road was a small forest, dark and dense. I used all my remaining strength to run desperately into the forest, ignoring the branches hitting my face, ignoring the pain from the high heels digging into my feet. I didn't dare stop, didn't dare look back. I didn't know how far I had run until my legs felt like they were being torn apart, and my lungs felt like they were about to explode. I knelt down in the bushes, hiding in the darkness, tears streaming down my face. In the distance, I heard him call out, his voice full of menace. "Where are you, bitch? I'll just lick you once." I held my breath, clutching my body, praying for protection from God. A moment later, the sound of the car door slamming shut was followed by the roar of the engine as the car sped off. I still didn't dare move, unable to believe that everything was over. I sat there until the sunlight filtered through the tree branches and the silence enveloped the entire forest. As the sun rose higher, I crawled my way out of the forest. I stood by the roadside, my clothes dirty and torn, my eyes sore from crying all night. I raised my hand to flag down another car, and this time I swore I would only trust women. A middle-aged woman stopped. When she saw me, she opened the car door, her eyes filled with concern. I got into the car, my body still trembling. She asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. I was completely exhausted. A few days later, I was hospitalized for a health checkup. I needed to know if something had happened to my body, whether I had been assaulted or injected with something. The results showed that I had not been violated, but that didn't ease the haunting thoughts in my mind. That event changed me forever. I was no longer the girl chasing after meaningless parties, no longer trusting strangers just because they smiled at me. I understood that my own safety was the most important thing. I felt lucky to have survived, but I also hated myself for the naivety that had led me into that terrifying situation. That lesson, I will never forget. I had changed. No more party nights, no more impulsive decisions. I chose a different lifestyle, one that I could control, so that I would never have to face the fear I felt that day again.
Janet and I had been together for almost a year. The sweetest, happiest love. I really treasured that. To show I was serious about this relationship, I told Janet to take me to meet her parents. Maybe some other time, hun. When then? I've told you about this like 9 times already, Janet. But my parents need some time. They're kind of busy with some people. I couldn't get what my girlfriend was trying to explain, and every time it came up, things got tense between us. Is there something making you not trust me? I asked, looking at my girlfriend with sad eyes. No, Ted, you're the best. I just can't. What do you mean? Oh no, I just need some time. That's what I mean. The convo ended awkwardly. A bunch of questions popped into my head. We put this on hold for a bit. One evening, Janet whispered to me, "Tomorrow, I'm heading to my parents' place." My girlfriend went to visit her parents for a few days every month. I tried to act busy, not really paying attention, and just mumbled like I got it. But honestly, I had a little plan up my sleeve. The next morning, I told my girlfriend I'd head to work early since I had a ton of stuff to take care of at the office. After a moment of kinda awkward goodbyes, I was in the trunk of her car. Yeah, I was gonna follow Janet home and surprise her and her parents. The car took off pretty quick, and Janet seemed excited to see her family. After struggling for a bit, I finally found a comfy spot. "Honey," Janet called out so suddenly that I nearly jumped to answer. "I'm almost there, so remember to make sure everything's clean." Her next words made my heart and body freeze. I just lay there in shock in the trunk of the car until I heard another voice say, "I miss you so much." Then I heard the sound of a sweet kiss. I felt like I was gonna explode and wreck everything. "Let's go see your parents," Janet said, all excited. Damn it. So when she said not ready and needs some time, she was just busy sorting out her priorities to me? Alright, I'm gonna call you out on your lying face. I held back my anger to stick to the plan in my head. My body was numb from being in the trunk for almost 40 minutes. My right leg was cramping up, and my ears were ringing with those two's lies and gross words. Just when my body was about to hit its limit, the car finally stopped. Janet's parents were super cheerful, laughing and greeting her when she got back, but her other boyfriend's voice was nowhere to be heard. "I think it's about 190 pounds. That's enough to last us for the next month." "You guarantee the quality, Janet?" "Don't worry, you two." Peeking through the gap in the half-closed trunk, I was shocked to see Janet's 3 family members putting her other boyfriend on a cart. I didn't know if he was still alive, but Janet's dad just talked about how much meat they eat in a month. Could it be that the meat they eat is... I blurted out while thinking about those creepy scenes. Suddenly, the trunk popped open, and a woman screamed, which totally startled me. It was Janet's mom. My body was numb, and my mind was screaming at me to run, but I just couldn't move. A sudden sharp pain hit me, shot right into my nervous system, and then everything went black. I don't know how long later, I woke up in a dark, cold room, lying on a table, with my clothes stripped off. "That's my boyfriend, the one I'm serious about." "No way, Janet. He knows our secret." I heard Janet talking to her parents. I needed to find a way out of here first, so I got up and thought, this looks like a cold storage room. On the nearby table were some dishes. Sushi, fingers, with big and small pieces of meat cut up all nice and pretty. The strong fishy smell and the mix of spices with those creepy dishes looked like they were straight out of a movie, made me feel sick. I covered my mouth and stepped back. My body was still kinda out of it from the dose, so I was wobbly on my feet. I tripped and slammed into this big cabinet, and it popped open. Right in front of me fell a half-prepped corpse. There was a guy missing limbs, eyes, ears. I can't even give you the details because I was too scared to look at it closely. Right away, my stomach cramped up, and everything I had in there came straight back out. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing this person was that other boyfriend from before. The door swung open, and Janet and her parents were standing there, looking at me all surprised and pissed off. "Ted, honey!" Janet ran over and plopped down next to me, looking all worried and sweet. "Get away from me, you devil!" I was totally grossed out by her fake smile. I weakly shoved Janet away with whatever strength I had left. Her dad saw that and came running over with a knife, looking all intense. "Stop it, Dad!" Janet yelled, putting her hand up in front of me. I didn't have much time to stick around in this nasty slaughterhouse. I shoved Janet hard towards her folks and bolted out of there. I had to run. I had to survive. Behind me, Janet's parents were cursing, threatening me, and yelling for me to stop. I gotta thank Janet for slowing them down so I could make a run for it. I ain't the first victim, but I'll be the last. I'm gonna put an end to this messed up family. Ted, come on. If I really wanted to eat you, I would have brought you to meet my parents a month after we hooked up. Janet shouted after me. At that moment, I was just looking out for me. I jumped in the car, locked the door, and peeled out of there completely naked. At the closest police station, I had to waste a bunch of time convincing the police that I'd been hurt. They didn't buy my story and even called the psych ward to check me out. Janet's family bailed, and the police handed me a note she wrote with her goodbyes and regrets that they found at the house. I just ripped it up right away. There were 15 victims in total. Healthy young guys, around 25 to 30, just like me, who got eaten by her family for almost 3 years. I totally bounced, changed all my contact info, and switched to a different job. That was freaky, thinking I almost got eaten alive. I'm Dante, 46 years old. I live in Houston with my wife and 18-year-old daughter, Selena. 3 months ago, a terrible incident happened that caused us to lose our beloved Selena forever. It was a weekend evening. Around 11 p.m., I drove to pick up Selena from a birthday party. A while ago, she told me to go to Laura's birthday, Selena's best friend. I learned that Laura lives alone. That house was bought by her parents on her 18th birthday. When arriving at Laura's house, silence prevailed. I guess the party is over. I sat in the car and called Selena, but after 3 phone calls, she didn't pick up. I was worried and was about to get out of the car to ring the doorbell when Selena ran out. The girl was still wearing her party outfit, but she was wearing a baseball cap that covered her face. Selena opened the car door and sat in the back seat. I turned back to ask, but she didn't answer. I told her to get in the front seat, but Selena just sat with her head down and shook her head. The smell of alcohol was strong throughout the car. I guess she's drunk because she drank too much. I didn't say much more and started driving home. On the way home, I kept glancing through the rearview mirror in the car to see Selena's situation. While passing a Burger King store, Selena suddenly spoke. "Can I have a burger, Dad?" I was a bit surprised. She spoke with a strange voice and spoke very fast. It took me a few seconds to respond. "Okay, kiddo." I stopped the car in front of a burger store. Selena immediately opened the door and quickly rushed out of the car. I was both surprised and worried, quickly took off my seatbelt and took my phone into the store. I remember it was almost 12 o'clock at night. Entering the store, there were only a few customers and 2 male employees left. Looking at the service counter, I didn't see Selena there. I looked around the store but couldn't see her. I went to ask the store staff. He said just now a girl wearing the clothes I described came into the bathroom. Maybe she felt uncomfortable, so she wanted to use the bathroom first, I thought. I stood at the service counter ordering a cheeseburger. I know Selena's preferences very well. About 5 minutes later, the burger was being made, but Selena still hadn't appeared. I walked towards the bathroom, stood about 1 meter from the door and called out. Selena did not answer. I continued calling and lost my patience. I approached and knocked on the bathroom door. Suddenly, the door slowly opened. I was surprised to see there was no one inside. I could clearly feel the smell of alcohol still in the bathroom. I went to the service counter. She wasn't there. I grabbed the burger and ran to the car. Selena wasn't in the car either. Returning to the store, I looked around again but still couldn't find my daughter. I asked the staff. They all said they didn't see Selena. One of the 2 employees there said he heard the sound of water being flushed while I was ordering a burger. I started to feel worried and really confused. Selena has never had such strange behavior. I told 2 male employees to let me review the images from the surveillance camera, and they happily agreed. Surveillance camera images show that Selena entered the store and headed towards the bathroom, but since then, she has not appeared again. There were the last few customers I saw at the beginning walking out of the store with a girl. I quickly picked up the phone to call Selena, but she left the phone in the car. I called my wife. She said the girl wasn't home yet. By this time, I was really worried and insecure. Everything happened so quickly and inexplicably that I had no time to react. I returned home and told my wife the whole thing. My wife quickly called the police. That whole night, my husband and I didn't sleep. We consoled each other that Selena was just drunk and fell asleep somewhere. Early the next morning, my husband and I went to Laura's house. Laura said the last time she saw Selena was when I picked her up. Laura was very worried. She said she would contact a few other friends to look for Selena and my husband and I. I announced the bad news to Merlin, which was that her boyfriend was 3 years older than Selena. But he didn't have any worries when he found out. Just like that, my daughter mysteriously disappeared. The police are still actively searching. It's been nearly 3 months and my husband and I never lost hope of finding Selena. I always prayed to God for her safety, but he did not hear my prayers. One morning, the local news channel reported a horrific case. At the young girl's house, they found the body of a man who had been strangled to the point of suffocation. He had bruises all over his body and had many needle punctures. Not only that, the police also discovered the decomposing body of a girl hidden in the attic. The police discovered that the young girl's house contained a lot of drugs and other illegal substances under the bed. My wife and I were dumbfounded. That killer girl was Laura. The man's body was Merlin, my daughter's boyfriend. My wife burst into tears. She looked at me in pain but couldn't say a word. I understood what my wife meant. I was frightened by my speculations in my head. I contacted the police in charge of Selena's disappearance. After investigation, they determined that the decomposing body of the girl in Laura's house was Selena, my daughter. Police said Laura admitted that she and Merlin had been secretly going back and forth behind Selena's back. That birthday party, they had a terrible argument. After all the guests left, Laura, Merlin, and Selena remained to resolve the conflict. In anger, Selena was strangled by Merlin. Laura witnessed my daughter gradually lose her life, but was very happy. They became a couple, often going to Laura's house to have fun and use drugs. In a drunken stupor, Laura strangled Merlin while he slept, and then used a needle to stab Merlin's body multiple times. So the person I picked up that night was Laura. She disguised herself as Selena and created a mysterious disappearance. Why don't I recognize my own daughter? I'm Egan, 45 years old. I'm the chief of police at the Westchester Police Department, Pennsylvania, USA. I love my job and have many certificates and medals for my contributions in the profession. At the end of 2023, my teammates and I successfully solved the case of a drug production and trafficking ring in the city. The leader of that ring is Dominic. He is like a ferocious and cunning stray dog. To successfully solve that case, I lost my little finger while confronting Dominic. He was sentenced to life in prison and is being held at Chester Prison. Nothing would happen until earlier this year. Dominic escaped from prison. Dominic's arrest warrant was immediately issued throughout Chester County and other counties in Pennsylvania and neighboring states. After many days of searching and investigating, Dominic was still missing. At around 10 o'clock last night, the police department received a call from a resident reporting that Dominic was seen hiding at a nearby abandoned hospital. My teammates and I immediately set out. According to the displayed location, that abandoned hospital is Pennhurst, located in Spring City. The hospital is used to treat people with mental illness and disabilities. It has been closed since 1987. Police cars arrived at the hospital at nearly 11 a.m. We sealed off the entire area outside the hospital. After that, I and 3 other policemen will be responsible for searching for Dominic inside. When we entered the hospital lobby, we looked around and then split up in different directions to look for Dominic. I held the gun and flashlight tightly and gradually entered the treatment area for mental patients. Even though I've been through a lot of cases, but searching for a dangerous criminal in an abandoned hospital scene at midnight still keeps me on edge. I cautiously observed my surroundings, mentally ready because Dominic could attack at any time. Shining my flashlight into every corner, the cold feeling increased as I went deeper into the hospital. I was about to leave when I looked closely at a hospital room and saw nothing. Suddenly, a breeze blew past my ears, as if someone had run past me. I immediately turned around, one hand holding the gun, the other shining a flashlight, but there was no one. Slowly, I turned around and continued walking, but I was always alert to both sides and behind me. When I got to a larger hospital room, I saw some personal belongings, clothes, and leftover food boxes. Everything has just been used, as the food still shows no signs of spoilage. I confirmed over the radio with all my teammates inside and outside the hospital. There are people living in this abandoned hospital. It is highly likely that it is Dominic. Quickly, search and arrest. As I finished speaking, crazy laughter rang out outside the hospital hallway. The laughter was very loud and echoed in the dark and cold space. I quickly ran out into the hallway, holding my gun firmly and ready to pull the trigger at any moment. But strangely, there was no one there. Maybe he can turn invisible or evaporate, I thought to myself. The horror happened again. Behind me, in front of my eyes, on both sides of me, there appeared a lot of uncontrolled laughter, screams, fast-running footsteps, and the sound of wheels. It was like someone was pushing stretchers through the hallways. I was motionless for a moment, trying to reshape everything. I've heard many rumors about the horror of this hospital. What I could do at that moment was stay calm and continue looking for Dominic. As soon as I turned around, I shined my flashlight into a room on the right and was about to enter. Standing close in front of me was a strange woman, eyes wide open, mouth wide open, neck twisted to one side. I was startled and screamed loudly, immediately stepped back and dropped the flashlight. It took a few seconds for me to calm down, pick up the flashlight and look into the room. That girl has disappeared. Suddenly, a man's panicked scream rang out loudly. The screams were menacing but full of fear. I'm sure it's Dominic's voice. I ran quickly into the hallway to locate the scream and began searching. Dominic's screams became clearer and closer each time, but there began to be weakness and despair. I ran into room 1313. The first thing I felt was the smell of blood. Looking around with the flashlight, I was startled to see Dominic's body on an old hospital bed with 2 broken legs. His body was still hot, his hand clutching a sharp knife stabbed deep into his chest. Blood continued to flow from the wound. Next to the hospital bed, there are still some medical equipment from ancient times. On the bed is a wristband with the words Lanny written on it. Could this be the name of the patient in this room? Could this be the girl I saw earlier? 3 of my teammates also ran over and were shocked to witness the scene before their eyes. Dominic's body was examined and determined to have died by suicide. There were no signs of any attack, so the case is over. But my 3 teammates and I still don't believe that Dominic committed suicide. Could it be that Dominic did something to make the soul of a woman named Lanny angry?
I am Sarah, 34 years old, living with my husband Daniel in a small house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. We chose this place for its tranquility and open space, a place where the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the chirping of birds each morning create a perfect picture of life. But what happened last week made me no longer feel safe in my own home. The story began on a Friday morning when the house next door welcomed a new couple. From my kitchen window, I saw them unloading their belongings from the car into the house. They didn't seem particularly remarkable. The woman wore a long dress, her hair partially covering her face, her skin pale. The man was tall and broad-shouldered. Both of them had an unusual demeanor, as if they were quietly observing everything around them. Suddenly, their eyes landed on me. I was startled and quickly looked away. Their presence unsettled me, but I brushed off the feeling. They were just tenants, probably introverted people. During the day, the couple remained private. I rarely saw them outside, and when they did, they moved quickly between the car and the house. But at night, everything started to change. Around 10 p.m., while Daniel and I were sitting on the sofa watching a comedy movie, a light from the neighbor's backyard caught my attention. I walked to the living room window and saw candles being lit, forming a perfect circle in the yard. The couple stood within that circle, heads bowed, holding small objects I couldn't make out from afar. I could hear the man's voice, low and continuous, like he was chanting an incantation. The air outside suddenly grew heavy. A chill ran down my spine, and I didn't know what to do. Daniel reassured me, saying they might be performing some kind of spiritual ritual. I had my suspicions about the couple and their ritual, but Daniel advised me not to dwell on it. They're not bothering anyone, so we should respect their privacy. I listened to my husband, returned to the sofa, but I could no longer focus on the movie. The next morning, after the second night, I woke up feeling strangely uneasy. The air in the house felt suffocating. Daniel was still fast asleep, but I couldn't stay in bed any longer. An inexplicable urge pushed me to step outside into the backyard. The early morning air sent a chill over my skin. The dim sunlight reflected off the dewy grass. My feet moved instinctively, scanning the yard. Then, near the fence, something shiny caught the sunlight. It was a silver necklace with an upside-down black pentagram pendant, engraved with strange symbols like ancient runes. I had never seen anything like it before. The moment I picked it up, an unnatural coldness crept up my spine. I stared at it, a deep sense of unease growing within me. Why was it here? I didn't tell Daniel, partly because I feared he would think I was overreacting, and partly because I didn't even understand what was happening myself. I hid the necklace in my desk drawer, trying to shake off the eerie feeling creeping over me. That night, exhaustion weighed on me in an unusual way, as if my energy had been drained. The moment I closed my eyes, I was pulled into a deep sleep, and then the dreams came. I saw myself standing in the backyard, surrounded by darkness. Candles flickered, forming a circle around me. The couple knelt across from me, their mouths moving in endless murmurs of incomprehensible sounds. The air in the dream was crushing. I wanted to move, to scream, but I couldn't. My legs felt nailed to the ground. My arms hung limply by my sides, my entire body frozen. I jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat. For a brief moment, I thought I could hear whispers from somewhere in the house. But then I turned, and my heart nearly stopped when I realized it was Daniel. He was sitting upright in bed, his eyes wide open, staring at something distant. His lips moved, murmuring strange, unintelligible words. I called his name, but he didn't respond. It was as if he wasn't in control of his own body. The next morning, I told Daniel what had happened, but he had no recollection of it at all. He simply laughed and reassured me that I was probably just stressed and imagining things. But for a split second, his eyes held something unfamiliar, both worry and a hint of something else, something hidden, just out of reach. One afternoon, while absent-mindedly glancing through the kitchen window, I saw the neighbor woman standing motionless in her backyard, eyes shut. In her hands, she held a silver necklace identical to the one I had found. Her lips murmured something soft, rhythmic, unsettling. So the necklace wasn't there by accident. It had been deliberately placed in our backyard as a summoning mark to pull me into their ritual. The couple wasn't just performing their ceremony in their own yard. The ritual was seeping into our lives, drawing us in unknowingly. Then came the final night. Footsteps echoed in our backyard. I bolted upright, yanked open the bedroom curtain, and my heart nearly stopped. The couple stood there, in the middle of a burning candle circle. the flickering light casting eerie shadows over their pale faces. They were staring straight at our window, but their eyes were completely white, blank, emotionless, just hollow, soulless voids, but somehow their gaze gripped me, held me captive. I heard the deep murmurs again, but this time, they weren't just sounds. I could feel the words sinking into my mind, creeping through my thoughts like unseen tendrils, forcing me to stare back. I reached for my phone to call the police in, but the moment I did, the lights in the yard went out. When we looked again, the couple was gone. An eerie silence filled the night. From that moment on, we couldn't sleep. The stillness of the night, the weight of dread, it consumed us. I felt weaker with each passing day, as if my energy was being drained every night. Strange bruises appeared on my arms and legs without explanation. Daniel began sleepwalking. I woke up one night to find him standing in the living room, whispering words I couldn't understand. When I called his name, he turned to look at me, with eyes that were no longer his. One morning, Daniel stepped outside to check the yard. He came back inside, face pale, holding a folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I took it from him, unfolding it to read. The message was scrawled in black ink. "Thank you for participating." A cold dread settled deep into my bones. I felt as if something unseen had wrapped itself around us. Daniel's expression was one of sheer terror. We couldn't stay there any longer. We packed our things and left the house immediately. But just before we left, I opened the drawer to take another look at the necklace, and that's when I froze. Next to it lay an old, yellowed photograph. In the picture was a group of people dressed in black robes, standing in a circle, each of them wearing the exact same silver necklace. But what shocked me most was Daniel standing between them, right next to the neighboring couple, with a mysterious smile.
I am Sarah, 26 years old, recently graduated from university, and I am looking for my first job. My life, after going through a major setback, having to attend therapy sessions, has slowed down compared to my friends. Though I try to change, the feelings of anxiety and loneliness never leave me. I still keep old photos on my phone, bad memories from the past, memories of him, flooding back like nightmares. One day, while scrolling through LinkedIn searching for career opportunities, I received a message. At first, I thought it was just a regular interview invitation, but upon reading it carefully, I felt something was off. This company wanted to invite me to a house in the suburbs instead of a company office. The address they sent was hard to find, and there was no information about this company online. However, I couldn't pass up this opportunity. It had been too long since I felt like I was stuck, unable to move forward. Despite my fear, I decided to go. When I arrived, I felt like I was stepping into another world. The large house was isolated in a desolate suburb. Although it looked very luxurious on the outside, the atmosphere around it was cold. The silence was terrifying, and there were no signs of a normal work environment. As I stepped inside, I felt a heavy atmosphere with nothing but the sound of my footsteps. The further I went, the more uneasy I felt. When I entered a large room, I was startled to see a few people sitting silently. Their eyes were vacant, dazed, and they didn't respond to my greeting. A man walked in and introduced himself as the owner of the company, but instead of interviewing me, he offered me to participate in a strange experiment. "We want to see how you adapt to the company environment," he said. "Try a drug to test your body's reaction." Unsure how to respond, I accidentally noticed a photo placed on the table behind him. It was him, with a cryptic smile. Every detail in the photo left me stunned. How could it be? Ryan was here. My mind spun. Pieces of the past began to fall into place. The terrible memories of when I was immersed in addiction, about how Ryan, the awful boyfriend, had dragged me into that world, now came flooding back. I felt a lump in my throat. My world suddenly collapsed. How could he be here? Surely he had staged everything to pull me back into this past. Fear surged, and I couldn't sit still any longer. Ryan was not just part of my past that I wanted to forget. He was still controlling everything, still finding ways to drag me into a world I had tried so hard to break free from. I quickly left, running away from this real-life nightmare, but he was waiting for me ahead. Ryan smiled with satisfaction. I helped you enter this world, and now you will be a part of it. My heart raced. A chill ran down my spine. The memories of him, of the painful days, of the times I let him manipulate my life, now all came rushing back. I tried to suppress my fear, but I couldn't. I saw in his eyes a sense of triumph, as if he had won. I couldn't breathe, couldn't say anything. The feeling of weakness and failure returned. My heart raced wildly. Everything before my eyes went dark. I woke up feeling disoriented, surrounded by groaning and heavy breathing. I opened my eyes, and it took a few seconds to realize I was in a dimly lit room with gray brick walls, a suffocating atmosphere filled with the smell of dampness and drugs. But what scared me the most were the images around me. People were writhing in withdrawal. Their faces were wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, as if they were lost in a nightmare they couldn't escape. They curled up in pain, gasping for breath, like wild animals trapped. These scenes were not unfamiliar. I realized it was me, before, when I was with Ryan, when I was drowning in drugs, when my body writhed every night in withdrawal. I remember that feeling very well, but I never dared to think I would face it again. The groans of the people around me were like a sharp pain in my ears. This was me before. I curled up, hands tightly covering my ears, eyes shut. Suddenly, music started playing. I discovered an old phone in the pocket of a man who had collapsed. I rushed over in excitement, quickly dialed the police, but I couldn't tell them exactly where I was. This house was in a desolate suburb with no signs of the outside world. The police couldn't know where I was, and it might take a long time to reach here. My head was spinning. I couldn't just sit here and wait for help. I looked around and saw a faint light through the window. Part of me wanted to stay in contact with the police, but another part knew that if I didn't act immediately, I would be stuck in this nightmare forever. I quietly left the room, trying not to make any noise. I knew they wouldn't let me escape easily, but I couldn't stand still, couldn't wait any longer. They would find me soon. As I crept down the hallway, I heard hurried footsteps from the end of the house. The people in the house were looking for me. I didn't know if they were informed about my call to the police, but I was sure they wouldn't let me escape. A cold feeling surged inside me. I had to choose an escape route, the back door. That was the only hope I had. But when I ran to it, the door was locked. At this point, despair overwhelmed me. I looked around for another way out. The darkness surrounding me made me feel even more trapped. Suddenly, I heard a voice from behind, the sound of footsteps pounding down the nearby hallway. They were getting closer. But then I saw a small, almost forgotten window at the end of the hallway. I rushed toward it, my trembling hands trying to open the window. And then I saw a gap big enough for me to escape. Desperation and hope intertwined. I squeezed through the gap, seizing my only chance. I ran outside, gasping in panic, finally out of the house, and the police arrived. The people in the house were arrested shortly after, except for Ryan. He had died a few hours before from a drug overdose. I was saved, but the ghosts of the past weren't easily erased. I continued therapy. Each session was a new challenge, but
My name is Iris, and I live in Leicester, North Carolina, a quiet community that is half country and half suburb. My closest neighbor was a woman named Holly, who lived alone with her 2 pet dogs. Since we both had a habit of waking up early to go jogging, we often ran into each other and would jog together for a stretch. We weren't incredibly close, but we always shared some friendly small talk whenever we met. One morning, I went out for my usual jog, but Holly was nowhere to be found. As I passed by her house, I noticed a strange man standing near her driveway. He looked unkempt with messy hair, and his eyes kept darting around as if he were keeping watch. In his hand, he he was holding a black trash bag. The moment our eyes met, he suddenly flashed a friendly smile, which completely contradicted his sneaky behavior from a second ago. It made me feel uncomfortable, and I didn't want to get involved in someone else's business, so I pretended not to notice and kept running. On my second lap around the block, I passed Holly's house again, and the man was gone. However, the black trash bag had been left behind near the edge of the road, about 20 yards away from her property. I assumed he was just some litter bug dumping his garbage in someone else's neighborhood. I didn't see Holly for the rest of my morning jog. I figured she wasn't feeling well and had decided to skip her workout for the day. But by that afternoon, I still hadn't seen her out walking her dogs like she always did. Holly owned 2 large dogs that were incredibly energetic, and she took them outside to run around every single day. Seeing them cooped up felt very strange, and a bad feeling started lingering in the back of my mind. The next morning, as I jogged past her house, I heard the dogs whining from inside. They sounded miserable and highly distressed. Trusting my gut, I stopped and decided to go check on things. I called out her name a few times, but no one answered. Noticing the front door was unlocked and cracked open, I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. Following the sound of the whimpering, I found the 2 dogs locked inside a guest bedroom. They were scratching at the door and crying continuously. The moment I let them out, they began searching the house, running straight into Holly's master bedroom to look for their owner. I hurried after them and froze in shock. The safe had been pried wide open, and the bedroom window was smashed to pieces. Sensing that something terrible had happened, I called the police immediately. When the police arrived to inspect the home, they confirmed there were clear signs of a break-in. However, there was no blood, no signs of a struggle, and 0 evidence to prove an attack had actually taken place inside. At first, the officers assumed Holly had simply gone out of town for a few days. That night, right after I drifted off to sleep, I had a horrific nightmare. In the dream, I saw my neighbor dead. Her body was trapped under a car, and a pair of large hands was dragging her away. The scene then shifted into a bathroom, where a man was stripping off her clothes and stuffing them into a black trash bag. I bolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat, with my heart hammering violently against my ribs. The image of the black trash bag from my nightmare immediately connected with the exact bag the unkempt man had been holding in front of Holly's house the day before. As soon as the sun came up, I contacted the police and gave them every detail about the suspicious stranger. I later learned that the police managed to track the trash collection route for our area. But since 2 days had already passed, the garbage had been hauled to a massive landfill, making the search incredibly difficult. After sorting through mounds of waste, they finally found the black trash bag matching my description. Inside were Holly's blood-stained clothes, along with DNA and fingerprints belonging to the man. The suspect was quickly identified as a man named Gavin. He lived in a remote part of town and had known Holly previously. According to Gavin's confession, everything started as an accident when he asked Holly to help push his stuck vehicle. He claimed he accidentally hit the gas pedal instead of the brake and ran her over, killing her instantly. Instead of panicking or calling 911, the savage killer calmly drove her body to his property, dismembered her, and burned the remains to destroy the evidence. After that, he casually returned to Holly's house, broke the window, and cracked the safe to stage a robbery and throw off the investigation. I thought that was the most horrifying part of the story. But as the police dug deeper into his background, they discovered Gavin was linked to a cold case involving a missing person from 15 years ago. On his property, investigators uncovered a hidden pit containing human skeletal remains that had been burned and concealed for over a decade. To this day, what haunts me the most isn't just what Gavin did to Holly. It is the memory of him standing just a few feet away from me, holding a bag containing his victim's bloody clothes, looking me dead in the eye and smiling. It was the calculated smile of a cold-blooded killer. If I had let my curiosity get the better of me and stopped talking to him that morning, I could have very easily become another missing person on Gavin's record. Following the tragedy, I went through the legal process to adopt Holly's poor dogs. Every day when I walk them down our usual path and look over at Holly's empty house, I silently promise her that I will take the best care of them. It is my way of thanking fate for letting me survive my encounter with a monster. This story is inspired by a true case that shocked the nation in 2015. A young couple, Christy Schoen and Joseph Codd, suddenly vanished from their home in North Carolina while expecting their first child. The crime scene showed signs of a staged break-in. Thanks to neighbors who reported a suspicious vehicle, police arrested Robert Jason Owens, a handyman who knew the family. He confessed to accidentally running them over, dismembering them, and burning their remains in a wood stove. A wider investigation revealed this killer was also responsible for the high-profile disappearance of a college student named Zeb Quinn 15 years earlier in the year 2000.
That fateful night helped me turn my life around, but it happened in the most horrific way a human being could ever experience. My name is Dante. Years ago, when I was an addict living on the streets of Philadelphia, my entire life revolved around finding enough money for my next fix. At first, I worked all kinds of odd jobs like delivering packages and loading trucks to pay for my drugs. But as my addiction grew worse, my body started failing me. My need for the drugs increased, so I turned to theft. I noticed an older man in my neighborhood who lived all alone in a rather luxurious townhouse. He seemed wealthy, kept to himself, and was usually away from home in the evening. So one night, while experiencing a violent wave of withdrawal, I risked breaking into his house. My plan was to steal anything I could sell. As soon as I stepped inside, I smelled a very strong chemical odor. Right as I paused, I jumped in fear because it felt like hundreds of eyes were staring directly at me in the dark. I stood frozen for a few seconds. When nothing happened, I slowly shined my flashlight around. I realized the entire house was filled with life-sized dolls. I was startled, but the withdrawal pains were too intense for me to feel proper fear or care about the owner's eccentricity. I began rummaging through everything, searching for valuables, but the house contained nothing except for those dolls. Losing my patience as my cravings hit a breaking point, I started to snap. I began knocking over furniture and cursing. In a fit of rage, I swung my arm and shoved a doll that was sitting on a nearby armchair. When it hit the floor, my first thought was that it felt unusually heavy. It made a dull, solid thud against the ground, completely missing the hollow, brittle sound of plastic or foam. Immediately, an automated musical melody started playing from inside the doll. It sounded like a wooden music box, but the tune was strangely warped and distorted. I bent down and shined my flashlight closer. Because of the hard fall, the doll's head had snapped completely off the body. Right then, a disgusting stench, mixed with the heavy smell of chemicals, rushed up my nose, making me gag. What was sticking out from under the dress wasn't a plastic arm. It looked like shriveled, dried-up skin. My heart began to pound wildly. With a shaking hand, I moved the beam of light over to the head, lying right next to it. The wax mask on one side of the cheek had cracked open from the impact. Beneath that outer layer of wax, there was absolutely no plastic mold. It was a real human skull, covered in dried, stained scalp skin, with two empty, deep black eye sockets staring straight back at me. It felt like a jolt of electricity surged through my brain. I was so stunned that I completely forgot about my withdrawal symptoms. I slowly panned my flashlight around, looking back at the dozens of dolls surrounding the house. I snapped completely out of my drug haze as I realized exactly what I was standing in the middle of. In a state of total panic, I dropped the flashlight, sprinted out the front door, and just kept running and vomiting frantically. I found a public payphone and called the police.
For the next few days, I watched the news constantly, waiting for the results of the police investigation. Finally, the official details were released. Right after receiving my call, the police had searched the house and found a massive list of suspicious items, research files on hundreds of cemeteries, maps marking the locations of specific graves, digging tools, and plenty of documents proving the homeowner was grave robbing. The owner of the house was Professor Victor, a famous historian who had appeared on television and was highly respected as a model intellectual. But behind that image lay a horrific truth. The 29 dolls inside that house were not models at all. They were all real human beings that he had collected. It turned out that the evenings he was away from home were spent wandering around local cemeteries, digging up and stealing corpses. Just thinking about the fact that I used to walk past that house without knowing what was hidden inside sends a chill down my spine. The hundreds of eyes staring at me when I entered that house were actually real. It wasn't a hallucination caused by my addiction. After the investigation, the court concluded that Victor suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and truly believed his own distorted thoughts. They also determined he had no other deviant motives toward the bodies. However, that didn't make his actions any less horrifying. When he stood in court, Victor looked directly at the families of the victims and coldly stated, "You abandoned your daughters. I am the one who brought them back and kept them warm." That sentence made the entire courtroom go silent in shock. The families were filled with rage and agony, hearing the man who dug up their children's bodies speak such words. In the end, Victor was committed to a mental hospital indefinitely. As for me, after that horrific night, I was determined to get clean. That night made me realize that if I kept living that way, I would sooner or later die in some lonely corner or push myself into an even worse nightmare. I am Daniel, 40 years old. I came very close to death. It all started during a flight in June of this year. My brother Jacob and I were flying from Mumbai back to Manchester for our cousin's wedding. The flight took place in the morning. The weather was sunny and clear. I sat in seat 11A by the emergency exit. Jacob was next to me. Everything was normal as the plane taxied onto the runway. I even texted my wife that we were about to take off. No one thought that 30 seconds later, everything would fall apart. Right after the plane left the ground, I felt the engine stutter, as if it was choked. In the very next second, in a chilling moment of silence, the entire plane seemed to stall in midair. There was no engine sound, only the sound of breathing and a pounding heart in my ears. 5 seconds later, the left engine emitted a deafening explosion. My entire body was thrown forward out of the seat, then violently pulled back by the seatbelt, causing my chest to slam into the strap and my breath caught in my lungs. Everything in the cabin swayed in a fraction of a second. The cabin lights flashed erratically, green mixed with white, then went dark. A flight attendant screamed something, but before the sentence was finished, the plane plunged straight down. I saw Jacob's face turn to look at me, his eyes wide, his lips moving without a sound. Then everything exploded. The sound of twisting metal, shattering glass. Other passengers' screams merged with a terrifying crash. The plane had collided, as I later learned, with a medical student dormitory. The impact flung me to the right. My head slammed into the side of the plane, and my vision was a mix of red and black. A constant ringing noise filled my ears. The smell of burnt fuel and thick smoke was overwhelming. In that moment, I thought I was dead, but I don't know how long it was before I opened my eyes, and I was still breathing. My eyes were blurry from smoke and debris, but I could still see the hellish scene around me. Plane seats were shredded. Bent metal jutted out everywhere like giant blades. Bodies were scattered in various positions, blood pooling on the floor. My left arm wouldn't move. A searing pain ran from my shoulder down the entire left side of my body. My leg was trapped under the collapsed seat in front of me. I remembered and shouted Jacob's name, but there was only silence. I heard the distant sound of a fire truck siren. As I crawled out of the passenger compartment, I collapsed onto the shattered concrete of the building. A police officer ran over. He said something, but I couldn't hear clearly. All I could hear was a long ringing in my ears. I was put into an ambulance. What I remember next was the terrible pain. After receiving treatment, this is what I was left with. My shoulder was fractured in 2 places. My back had a spinal injury. My right kneecap was shattered. The left side of my body was partially paralyzed. I couldn't lift my left arm above my shoulder. I moved back to Buffalo for treatment, but the physical pain was followed by mental exhaustion and obsession. I lived in a closed room, refusing to see anyone. I didn't talk to my wife and children, though I once considered them my whole world. My 4-year-old son once asked, "Where does Daddy hurt?" But I couldn't answer. I could only sleep 3 to 4 hours each night. Nightmares always dragged me back to the moment the plane crashed, the screams, the sound of metal twisting. I always wore a Yankees baseball cap because it was Jacob's. He died right next to me. I became so negative that I once thought, God gave me life but took away all the happiness from me and my family. I couldn't work. The compensation from the airline hadn't been settled. My wife had to carry everything by working extra night shifts, and all I did was lie in a dark room and wonder why I was alive. I sought help from a psychiatrist. They called it survivor's guilt. It's considered a symptom within the PTSD group, post-traumatic stress disorder. The doctor suggested many methods, but they didn't help much. I have accepted the reality, but I haven't been able to escape it. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of the passengers who flew with me that day. The man in the row behind, clutching his brown leather briefcase. The young woman with headphones, nodding to the rhythm of the music. The silver-haired woman holding a newspaper. They all perished. I don't know why I remember their faces so clearly, even though I only glanced at them once. Every night, I dream of them looking at me. Their eyes hold no resentment, but they repeatedly ask, "Why are you still alive?" 6 months after the accident, I stepped out of my room for the first time to face my wife and son. My wife was cooking dinner, and my son was playing with toy cars on the rug. The house was decorated with colorful Christmas decorations. My nose stung as I realized my son was a little taller. My wife looked much thinner. When they saw me, they both ran over, concerned. Then I realized the terrible thing I had done. I had isolated myself from my wife and son for 6 months, but they were still here, always waiting and loving me. Unlike the families of the other 279 people, they didn't get the chance to welcome their loved ones home. I began to take my treatment more seriously, trying every way to return to my former life. Although I know it will never be completely the same, I am writing this story to remind myself it was not my fault. I am incredibly lucky that I survived, and I must cherish that luck. I must live well, live for Jacob too. Yesterday, my son asked, "Daddy, does it still hurt?" "Yes, son, but I will be okay." The story is inspired by a real-life accident. In June 2025, a serious aviation tragedy occurred in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India, when an Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner carrying over 240 passengers and crew members en route to London, England, crashed just minutes after takeoff. The accident killed almost everyone on board, but miraculously, only one person survived. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, 40, a British national seated in seat 11A. Despite miraculously surviving what was considered a near-certain death, he suffered severe psychological trauma and was quickly transported to a civil hospital in India for treatment.
I am Howard, a late-night radio host in New Orleans. I host a show called Night Whispers on a local FM station. Every night, I take calls from people who need to talk. They are insomniacs, lonely souls, or people carrying big secrets. They talk about everything: painful divorces, strange dreams, or wild conspiracy theories. They can choose to tell me who they are or stay anonymous. I'm used to the chaos of the night, but I was not prepared for what happened that evening. The studio was small and completely soundproof. Only the dim blue light from the control panels lit the room. Outside, the city of New Orleans was asleep. It was just me and the steady hum of the radio waves. Around 1 a.m, I received a call. The screen showed a blocked number. I picked up. "Welcome to Night Whispers. This is Howard."
"Hello, Howard,"
a man's voice said. I guessed he was middle-aged. I thought he just needed to vent like everyone else.
He called himself Clay. I was about to ask about his job or family, but Clay suddenly cut me off. His voice was flat and calm. I have killed 12 sex workers. I froze. My hand stopped right over the volume knob. At first, I thought this was just a sick joke or a drug addict talking nonsense. I took a breath and prepared to hang up professionally, but Clay kept talking before I could say a word. I killed the first one when I was only 16. I planned it in advance, and I have never been caught. My throat went dry. There was something about the stillness in his voice that made it impossible for me to hang up. Are you being serious, Clay? He began to describe how he operated. He said he usually found his victims in the New Orleans East area, where sex workers gathered. He didn't have to hunt. He would just park his car, turn on some music, and wait. He always chose women who looked weak and easy to manipulate. I tried to find a psychological motive, a reason to believe he was just a broken person. Were you abused? Or was it your mother? No, Howard. Don't look for those cliché reasons, he laughed softly. It was a dry, hollow sound. My mother was a wonderful woman. I didn't do it because of anyone else. I did it for the power. When you hold someone's life in your hands and they look at you with wide, pleading eyes, in that moment, you are God. A cold chill began to crawl down my spine. Every word Clay said pulled me deeper into a dark place. It shattered my calm exterior. He told me that sometimes he had made love with the victims before killing them. Sometimes I didn't need a reason. I didn't even need to reach a climax. I just wanted to end someone. He then shared a disgusting detail about murdering a transgender person. After realizing the victim's gender, he intentionally placed money in a sensitive area of the body to mock them. I always paid them, Howard. Even if they couldn't use it afterward, they deserved to get paid for their work. I stayed silent. All my skills for handling difficult callers were useless. Clay didn't seem to need me to say anything. He just needed a place to confess. He continued to fill the silence on his own. Don't you think you'll eventually pay for what you've done? I'm very good at hiding, he answered. He said he once thought about leaving a signature for the police. He wanted to dip a victim's thumb in paint and press it onto the body like a piece of art, inspired by a comic book. But in the end, it felt like too much trouble, so I didn't. Then, Clay mentioned one final detail that gave me goosebumps. When the bodies were found, the police suspected an officer who had a history with one of the victims. The whole investigation went the wrong way. It's funny, isn't it? I knew that case. The newspapers had reported on an officer who was suspended because of that suspicion. The details Clay gave were too accurate and too realistic to be a joke. So, why are you making this call and telling me everything? Clay sighed. He answered, as if he were talking to himself. I haven't done this for almost a year. At first, it was because my car broke down. But then I found that I could control myself. Did you ever spare anyone? Clay was silent for a moment. Yes. A few of them looked too innocent. There was one girl who reminded me of my ex-fiancé. I felt bad for her and let her go. I didn't have time to ask anything else. Clay suddenly hung up. I sat motionless in the studio. The hum of the radio waves felt like insects buzzing in my head. I tried to finish the broadcast. I hosted the rest of the show like nothing had happened, but my hands were soaked with sweat. The next morning, I didn't call the police right away. It wasn't because I took the confession lightly. It was because I had no physical evidence other than a phone call that lasted less than 10 minutes. I had no name and no address. I only had a calm voice and a series of chilling details from a horrific story. To this day, I still haven't forgotten that steady voice. If what Clay said was true, then somewhere out there in the city of New Orleans, a serial killer is still living free. And that night, he chose me to lighten his burden. This story is based on a real event from 1995. A man calling himself Clay called the Howard Stern radio show and confessed to killing 12 sex workers in New Orleans. To this day, the true identity of Clay and the authenticity of the murders remain one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in radio history. My name is Michael Collins, and I live in Tampa, Florida. I hate Florida summers. The humid heat feels like a wet blanket wrapped around your body, making my apartment feel like an oven, even with the AC blasting at full power. That night, the night everything ended, was no different. I walked into the apartment after my shift at the Clearwater Casino. The faint smell of whiskey lingered in the air. Rebecca, the woman I'd lived with for 2 years, a nurse at Tampa General Hospital, had already started drinking before I got home. Our relationship wasn't love. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Both of us carried wounds from our pasts. I had my uncontrollable anger and the bottle of whiskey that never left my bedside. She had bruises left behind by old relationships and a deep, gnawing fear of being abandoned. Two broken people trying to form something whole, only to hurt each other more. 2 weeks earlier, drunk and angry, I shoved Rebecca into the wall. The impact knocked over the table lamp, shattering it. A piece of glass cut her arm, leaving a long scar. I apologized 1,000 times, swore it would never happen again. But Rebecca's eyes had already turned cold. Everything between us was dying. That evening, we sat on the couch drinking and watching some mindless TV show. My head was foggy from alcohol and exhaustion. My phone vibrated. It was Jack, my last real friend. I stepped out onto the balcony to answer. His voice was tense. He told me he'd seen Rebecca at a bar the night before. She had been extremely drunk and had hinted at threats, revenge, and some disturbing plans. Jack warned me to leave the apartment immediately, but I ignored him. I went back inside. Rebecca was sitting there with a strange smile on her lips. A large black suitcase was sitting in the middle of the floor. Rebecca introduced a game, a challenge. I was supposed to climb into the suitcase and see how long I could last before begging to be let out. In my drunken haze, it sounded like a weird, harmless dare. Why not? We'd done crazier things before. I remember the feeling of climbing inside that suitcase. At first, there was a childish thrill, like hiding in a secret cave. It was big enough for me to curl up in, knees pulled tight to my chest. Rebecca leaned over me, smiling softly. When I heard the zipper closing, I was still laughing. Darkness swallowed me, with only a sliver of light slipping through the seam. The cramped, humid space quickly filled with my own hot breath, sweat dripping down my back. The first few minutes passed quietly. I heard Rebecca moving around. She was getting more ice for her drink. I asked when she would let me out. No answer. I assumed she was messing with me. But after a few more minutes, I started feeling genuinely uneasy. The air felt thick, suffocating. The heat pressed in on me. Nausea rose in my throat. I told her to open it. Still no answer. Instead, I heard a quiet laugh and the click of a phone camera. Around minute 9 or 10, real fear seeped in. The suitcase suddenly felt less like a hiding spot and more like a coffin. Every breath felt harder. The air was disappearing. I began begging. That's when Rebecca finally spoke, her voice cold and distant. She said this was the lesson I deserved for everything I'd done to her. The bruises, the insults, the broken lamp, the late-night ER trip. I finally understood. This wasn't a game. I pounded on the walls of the suitcase, kicked, threw my weight at it, anything to break out. But the thick fabric held, and being curled in a helpless position meant I had no leverage. The noise I made wasn't loud enough, and our apartment was always noisy from our fights. No neighbor would find anything unusual. 20 minutes later, my body started to seize. Panic made my breathing faster. burning through what little oxygen I had left. My fingers went numb. My head spun. I didn't have the strength to pound anymore. I heard Rebecca turn on the TV, loud enough to drown out the faint sounds I was still making. She even talked to someone on the phone, her voice calm, casual, like nothing was happening. Time became distorted. My brain tried to recall how long a person could survive with no air. 3 minutes? 5? I heard Rebecca moving around the apartment, then silence. Did she go to bed? While I was suffocating a few feet away? My last breath was a soft exhale. Death wasn't as terrifying as I thought. It felt like slipping into sleep after an unbearably long day. The only difference was that I would never wake up again. Death wasn't the end of my story. No, only the middle chapter. I watched Rebecca the next morning as she woke up. Her eyes widened as she remembered. She walked toward the suitcase with hesitant steps and unzipped it with trembling hands. Her scream caught in her throat when she saw my twisted, blue, rigid body. After her panic subsided, a strange calm washed over her. Rebecca started planning, wiping fingerprints, deleting messages, preparing a story about a drunk hide-and-seek game gone wrong. She dialed 911 with a shaking, tearful voice. Detective Daniels was the first to question her version. He noticed the bruises on my body, but fate stepped in. Rebecca's phone. She had forgotten to delete the videos and photos she took of me inside the suitcase. The undeniable proof of an intentional killing. The trial began 6 months later. Rebecca wore a Navy suit, keeping up the facade of a tragic accident. But when the evidence was shown, her composure shattered. On the final day, Rebecca confessed. Not out of guilt, but as a legal strategy. She talked about our violent, toxic history, the wounds I had caused her. She claimed she just lost control. The jury didn't buy it. Rebecca Sloan was sentenced to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder. Looking back on my life, I see all the terrible choices that led me into that suitcase. The drinking, the rage, the violence, the toxic relationship I didn't have the courage to leave. I wasn't an innocent victim. I died in a suitcase, a coffin I chose long before I climbed into it. And the worst part is, a small part of me still wonders, would she have opened it if I begged harder? This story was inspired by a real case. In the Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres case, Jorge Torres was found dead inside a suitcase in Orange County, Florida. His girlfriend, Sarah Boone, 45, was taken into questioning. At first, Sarah couldn't explain Jorge's injuries, but later admitted their relationship involved mutual violence, including Jorge hitting her weeks earlier. A video found on Sarah's phone showed her next to the suitcase, while Jorge said he couldn't breathe. Sarah responded coldly and laughed. She claimed it was a drunken hide-and-seek game and that she fell asleep while he was inside. She faces second-degree murder charges and could receive up to 16 years in prison if convicted.
I lived alone in a log cabin on the edge of the city.
This story happened in the year 1991. It is a very tragic but true story. My wife Alex and I were invited to my best friends, Tim and Jessica's private mountain house for the night, and to have a sort of small house party. And they had recently gotten engaged and invited us to celebrate with them. They also asked my brother Daniel and his girlfriend Madison to join us as well. My brother drove us all to Tim and Jessica's house. It was a wonderful private house in the woods and mountains. This took place during the summer, so the weather was really nice as well. We drove up the long driveway part and headed inside to greet our friends. We got to the house around 7 p.m. Jessica had been preparing a meal for all of us. We ate dinner, chatted, and reminisced about old times, and then played some fun couples games while we shared some wine and snacks. I honestly don't remember what the time was. I'm guessing around 10 p.m. or something. but we heard a knock on the front door. We all looked at each other with great confusion. I asked Tim if he was expecting anyone else, and he said no. Jessica opened the door and I stood next to her. And it was a woman. She must have been in her early 20s. She looked pale and had dark bags under her eyes. She said that she and her husband had broken down and they needed help. She then pointed behind herself and down the driveway. There is a pickup truck with the hood of the bonnet open and some guy waving at us. Myself and Daniel didn't know the first thing about cars, but Tim did. And so Tim offered to go down with some of his tools and to take a look. Meanwhile, the girl waited inside. She took a seat and the first thing she said was, "Do you have any food?" We all didn't say anything for a second, probably because of how weird and awkward the situation was. Jessica, being kind, said there was some leftover chicken that she could have. Jessica made her up a plate and handed it to the girl. She started to eat it so quickly, like she was starving or something. Each of us tried to make small talk with her, but she gave some vague answers though, and it didn't seem like she was interested in talking. I asked what she was doing out here and how they broke down, as I found it really odd that they got stranded right at the bottom of the driveway. She then said that me and my brother were on our way to go camping. I said, "Brother, I thought you said you're with your husband." She carried on, slowly eating before mumbling, and said something like, "Oh yeah, I met my husband." I thought, something just isn't right with all of this. And so, I went to take a look through the window down the driveway, and I couldn't see Tim or her supposedly husband. I said to my brother Daniel that we should go down and check if everything is alright, and he agreed with me. Daniel and I headed down the long driveway, while sharing each other's suspicions about that girl. When we got down to the car, Tim nor that guy was anywhere in sight. But what we did see was the toolbox that Tim had brought with him. It was on the floor with tools scattered everywhere. Daniel and I called out a few times, Tim, are you out here?" Both of us scanned the nearby woods and we couldn't see a thing. It had gradually been getting darker, and we couldn't see anything without flashlights, so going further into the woods was pointless. And so Daniel said that we should go back and call the police. About halfway up the driveway, we heard a scream coming from the house. It was one of the girls. Daniel and I ran up to the house as fast as we could, burst through the door and couldn't see where the girls were. We each called for our other halves' names. We heard another scream coming from upstairs. We ran upstairs and saw that girl kicking and screaming at the bathroom door, while holding a kitchen knife. Daniel and I tackled her to the ground and disarmed her of the knife. Daniel held the girl down while I went to check on the girls. Jessica had been slashed with a knife on her arm. It wasn't serious, but she was in some pain. Alex and Madison were untouched. I said that Tim is missing and we don't know where he is. Alex went to call the police but said that she couldn't get through. She said that there was no dial tone. As we couldn't get through to the police, I said let's just tie this girl up and wait until we figure out what to do. I asked Jessica where the flashlights were. Daniel and I grabbed the flashlights and said we needed to look for Tim as we think he was in trouble. I said to the girls, keep trying to get through to the police. We'll be back in 20 minutes and then we would drive to the nearest police station or anywhere with a phone in Daniel's car. Daniel and I went outside and we searched nearby for Tim. We walked around in the woods calling Tim's name. After some time of searching, we came across a telephone pole that had been chopped down. Someone must have done this on purpose, and that was the reason why we couldn't get through to the police. The line had been disconnected. We need to get back to the girls right now, I said to Daniel. We started running back towards the house, and then we heard something on the other side of the woods. It was what sounded like 2 gunshots. Daniel and I carried on running. Eventually, we got back to the bottom of the driveway, and were shocked to see that the pickup truck, along with the tools, were now gone. We didn't have time to ask questions as he wanted to get back to the house and to check the girls. When we returned to the house, it was empty and the girls were gone, and somehow, so was the girl who was tied up. We searched the entire house, the backyard, and again the nearby woods, and found no one or nothing at all. Me and Daniel got in our car and drove as fast as we could to the nearest police station, and we told the police everything that had happened. We waited at the police station for them to return. They came up with nothing, just like us. I'm gonna skip all the searching and mourning because this story is depressing enough. This story has haunted me my whole life. I don't know what happened that night, who those people were, where my wife or the others had gone missing to. My brother and I remain close and still do to this day.
My name is Gordon. I'm 22 years old, but this story happened when I was 10, and it takes place in Florida. Me, my 6-year-old brother, and parents were on our way to Disney World for the weekend. It was our first time driving there, and we got a bit lost. We had to leave in the afternoon, and it was quite a long drive from where we lived. And like I said, we got a bit lost. It was dark outside, and we had to drive through the country lanes, but it wasn't just dark. It was basically pitch black because there were no street lamps whatsoever. The country roads we were driving through were quite creepy. I know me and my brother were freaked out, and to be honest, I think my parents were too. We had been driving for a while and I had to pee very bad. I know we could pull over, but I really didn't want to because it was scary as hell out there. But unfortunately I couldn't hold it anymore, so I asked my dad to pull over. I got outside and I walked over to some nearby bushes, which led into a forest. It was pretty cold outside and I was shivering. Like I said, it was pitch black, but I could see a little bit because our car's headlights were on. I went to do my business when I heard a branch snap. I looked up and towards the woods, and I saw some kind of light. It was a lantern. I looked closer and it was floating up, and then I saw it wasn't floating. Someone was picking it up, and the lantern light revealed a face I would never forget. It was a man who looked to be in his late 40s. He had a gray beard, and he was smiling with his eyes wide open. He had crooked yellow teeth. I stood there in shock with tears in my eyes. He then motioned with his finger for me to come toward him. I pulled up my pants and ran back to my car. My mom said to me, "Are you okay, sweetie?" I just smiled and said, "Yeah," and we continued driving. I didn't say anything to anyone about what I saw, and I still had to pee, but what was on my mind was that man I just saw. We finally arrived and I was able to use the bathroom. Me and my brother were and still are close, so that night while we were laying in our beds, I told him what I saw, and to my surprise he didn't seem that freaked out when I told him. He looked down with a worried look on his face. Then he told me something he saw in the car while we were pulled over. He was looking outside of his window, which were farm fields. He said he saw what looked to be a family of 4 standing in the middle of a field, who were also holding lanterns. He then asked our mom who were those people, and her response was, "What people? There's no one out there." And at that point, that's when I got back in the car. That night, and many nights after, me and my brother have discussed what we saw, and we didn't know if it was real or not, or our imagination. I personally still believe to this day what I saw was real. This story still haunts me and gives me chills every time I think of it. What do you think? When I was in high school, about 10 years ago, I was home alone while my mom went to pick up my brother. And before my mom left, she told me to bring the dogs in. Now we had 2 beagles, one that was friendly but barked loud, and an older one that we had gotten from a shelter that was extremely protective and was not afraid to show his teeth. I usually ignored her, and left them outside for a bit. I was in the back part of the house and was on a computer when I heard a noise. I walked to our front room and saw a young guy near the front door looking inside my house. I stood slightly out of sight and saw him walk back and forth between our window and then back to the door. And then he tried opening the door. Then he literally threw himself against the door. Immediately, my blood went cold and I rushed to the back door and quietly yelled for the dogs to come in. They ran in and I herded them to the front room. Then I saw the mailbox slot open. I saw his eyes. He was looking right at me. Right away, my older beagle got on the defense and growled. It was more like, "I'm gonna bite you" type of growl, while the other one barked. I got my phone and called my mom and begged her to come back home, in which she did with my brother. They looked around and saw no other signs of entry. I triple check every door now, and even though those 2 dogs have passed away, I keep our current dog near me when I'm home alone. That was one of the scariest experiences I ever had in my life. I'm a 21-year-old woman, and when I was 5 years old, I could remember a situation happening. Then when I was a little older, I figured out that it could have gone very bad. My street was full of kids and our parents all knew each other. Every weekend, someone would have a sleepover. One Friday night, we all begged our parents to stay the night at Lisa's house. She was 6 years old at the time and lived 2 houses down from me. We were all outside, and once our parents said yes, we all went to our houses, bathed, grabbed blankets, and went to Lisa's house. After our parents dropped us off, Lisa's mother made everyone popcorn while we watched movies in Lisa's bedroom. We played and watched TV for hours. Then we all fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up to Lisa's bedroom door opening while all of us girls were sleeping on the floor on top of blankets. When I turned toward the light that was outside of the open door, I saw Lisa's dad in the doorway looking at us. In my 5-year-old mind, I thought he was just checking on us, so I went back to sleep. After being asleep for a bit, I wake up again, and it's her door opening. It's her dad again. He's standing in the doorway looking at us with the camera. I thought it was weird, because he had his shirt off also. I didn't let him know that I was awoke. When he walked away from the door, I waited a few minutes and ran home. I knocked on my big sister's window, which was downstairs, and she let me in. I told my parents, and they never let me back over there again. A few years later, Lisa's father was arrested for trying to kidnap a little girl who was outside riding her bike near her house. Every time I think of that night at Lisa's house and what he was caught for, I cringe because who knows what he was thinking and what he wanted to do. I'm glad he got caught and no other kids got hurt. This was a really weird but scary experience for me. I worked at a morgue a few years back. I'd also like to mention that this was the last time I smoked weed. Just throwing that in there. Anyway, on my way to work, one day I smoked a blunt. I bought the weed from some random guy, not my usual person. Anyways, this was actually my first day out of training, and they trusted me to be by myself. It was around 2 p.m. when I got to work, and everything started off normal. I hated the smell of that place though. We had a good amount of bodies stacked up there, and I was working on one. I turned around for a few seconds while looking for a tool, and I heard a moan from behind me. I paused for a second and remembered that some bodies still have air in them, and the air continues to come out, and the bodies will still make noises and sometimes move. I gathered myself, turned around, and now the man on the table, his eyes were wide open, as if he were looking at me. I paused once again and told myself that this is normal. At this point, it's starting to get dark outside, and it starts raining by coincidence. I know this sounds like a cliche horror story, but it really did happen. My anxiety was an all-time high, so I took a break. I had the munchies, so I decided to snack on a bag of chips. Then I heard something in the hallway. I couldn't tell what it was. At this time, I had the sweats, but I wasn't hot, but I was also really hungry. I got up to see what that was in the hallway. Then I heard something. It stopped me in my tracks before I reached the door. I stopped and I thought, I'm here by myself. I got the courage to walk into the hallway. When I turned the corner, I saw one of the bodies standing at the end of the hallway. I froze and I just stood there. This felt like a scary movie, but at this point I would be yelling for the person to run, but I couldn't move. I thought to myself, am I tripping right now? The body started walking toward me and I backed up. I rubbed my eyes for a few seconds, then I looked back down the hallway and the guy was gone. Again, I stood there for a few more seconds. Out of nowhere, every door in the building opened with force, and at the same time, that laugh again. I ran out of there so fast and called my boss. He laughed at me and came in while I sat in my car. He checked the building and everything seemed normal. I quit right there on the spot. I don't know. Maybe I was blazed, but the fear I felt was real. I know I haven't smoked since then, or ever worked with dead bodies.
I got this great job working at a hospital. I really got to do something that I enjoy. Taking care of others has always been a passion of mine, but I work on one of the hardest floors, the cancer floor. We always have the same patients, and not a whole lot of them make it. This makes my job hard in a lot of ways. You could probably guess that I've seen my fair share of death since I started here. Anyway, I work the night shift, and at night it can be a little creepy when you have to go to the morgue. One night, me and a coworker were taking someone down to the morgue. Now, let me explain. Our morgue is a little freezer box that is in the basement, and it smells horrible. Plus, it has a ramp to get into it. So she and I wheel the body down there, and we push it up the ramp. And then we begin to argue over who is going to push the body inside. Of course, I lose, so I swing the freezer door open, and I push in the body. Then I slam the door shut. We start to fill out our paperwork when we both look up at each other. She says to me, "Did you hear that?" I said, "I think so." We both turn and look at the door. The two of us got cold chills, and the hairs on our arms were standing straight up. It sounded like someone was crying. We froze, turned, and looked at each other, then ran out. Halfway down the hall, she asked if I really heard what she did, and I told her yes. I really didn't know what to think, so I was telling one of my friends who is a nurse on our floor the story. She tells me that she has had similar things happen to her in the morgue. To this day, I will not go alone, and I always try to get out of going at all. We also have a tradition on our floor that when someone passes away, we open the window so the soul of that person is not trapped in the hospital to roam. I'm not making this up. It truly happened. If you don't believe me, I don't care. I know, and so does everyone else who works there.
This story took place about 3 years ago. I started my new job working at a morgue that was about 3 miles to the countryside. For the first week, everything went fine. I got shown around the building, how everything works, and I understood my job. That was until I met the guy who used to deliver the bodies to the morgue. His name was Kenny. I first met him on the elevator. We shook hands and he made an inappropriate joke. He also stunk of smoke, had long greasy hair, bad yellow teeth, and a faded, poorly drawn tattoo of a snake on his forearm. My first thought that he was just weird. I figured I would only see him from time to time when he delivered the bodies. That wasn't the case, however, as he would come up into the building and talk to the staff. Apparently he had worked there for years and knew everybody. I asked a few staff members about him, and they kind of just shrugged him off as being eccentric. It was like I was the only one who saw through that. He would joke around with most people, but when it came to me, it was like he was a different person. The first time we met, he would make inappropriate jokes towards me. He would joke about the dead bodies that got delivered and make crude comments about the way the people died, and actually found it funny. One night, however, I was working on a body when I decided to take a little break. When I returned, I found the body was off the table and propped up against the wall. I almost had a heart attack. And then Kenny jumped out from the corner, screaming and grabbing my shoulder, shaking me violently. Then he stopped and laughed, telling me how good he got me, and my reaction was hilarious. This was the last straw, and I had enough and reported this to my superiors. My complaint was backed up by the footage from the CCTV cameras. The next evening, as I arrived into work, I saw Kenny walking down the corridor, and he didn't have his weird grin on his face. His look was much more disturbing. He looked furious, like he was a different person. He passed by me while giving me the worst stare I've ever seen. I was told later that he had been fired. I was a little bit surprised. I didn't know what they would do. I didn't know they were firing him exactly, but I was kind of relieved. That night, I finished work around 3 a.m. and got into my car to drive home. As soon as I pulled out, another car started up from across the parking lot and started to instantly tailgate me. Like I said, the building was located in the country, so there were no other cars on the road. At first, I didn't know who this was. I pulled over to see if the car would keep going, but as soon as I pulled over, the car slammed on its brakes. That was when Kenny came running out of his car and over to mine, yanking on the door handle as hard as he could, while banging on the window screaming for me to get out of the car. I thought he was going to rip the door off.
My brother is a mortician at a facility in New York, and one night when I was visiting, he asked if I wanted to go to work with him so I wouldn't be alone in his house. I reluctantly said yes. What's the worst that can happen, right? Boy, was I wrong. To start off with, this place was creepy as hell, dark and smelled funny. He said it was normal, and it was probably the smell of the formaldehyde, so I just ignored it. After a little time of chit-chatting and catching up, he told me that he needed to get to work, but that I could stay in the little adjoined office and watch some TV, and so that's exactly what I did for a little bit. The entrance to the morgue had swinging doors, and you could hear when someone was coming in or out of them. He came to check on me a few times, so I heard them. After a few hours of being by myself, I started to doze off, when the sudden sound of the doors woke me up. Expecting for my brother to walk in and greet me, there was nothing. Again, I started to fall asleep, and yet again, the loud doors went off. You couldn't tell if someone was coming in or out, but they kept on swinging and didn't stop. Thinking my brother was playing a joke on me, I got up and went to tell him to stop. But to my surprise, there was only a little girl standing there, playing by the doors, pushing them. "Hi," I told her. She looked at me and didn't say a word. One of the things that caught my eye was a pretty blue dress with a pink ribbon that she was wearing. "Your dress is pretty, and the bow makes it stand out. Again, no reply. She looked down and started to run the opposite way, towards a lonesome hall. I thought the kid belonged to another employee, so I went back to my chair and sat down. A couple of hours later, when my brother's shift was over, he finally woke me up to go back to his place. As we were driving, I started to tell him about the doors and the little girl with the cute blue dress and big pink ribbon. He slammed the brakes. "What the hell? Why did you brake?" He told me with a chilling look on his face. "Last night I did an autopsy on a little girl that drowned. She was wearing a blue dress with a big pink ribbon." My blood ran cold, and I've never been to work with my brother ever again.
Growing up, I lived in a heavily forested area. There's this now abandoned house that was in the woods behind my childhood home. The driveway connected to ours and broke off and circled around our garage and went deeper into the trees. It was a single-story house with a nice big front porch and had an outdoor overhang instead of a full garage. When I was a kid, we had an elderly neighbor who lived back there named Mr. Fisher. He was a Vietnam vet who was partially blind in one eye. He normally wore glasses or an eye patch on the rare occasions that we would see him outside. He kept to himself mostly and never really had any visitors. It was about 20 years ago, back when I was in high school. I was home alone playing on my Nintendo. I remember that it was later in the day and it was raining pretty hard. I was grounded for some reason that I can't remember, and I was bitterly sitting in my room taking out my teenage frustrations on the game, and that's when I heard screaming from behind my house. I paused my game, cracked open my window, and listened. Every few moments I would hear a faint screaming coming from Mr. Fisher's house, maybe 50 or so yards away from my own. I couldn't figure out if it was an angry scream or a terrified one, but I remember just sitting there for a few moments and listening to it, more curious than alarmed. After a few minutes, I got bored and shut the window and returned to my video game. I don't know why I didn't call for help or run over and knock on Mr. Fisher's door to see if things were okay. My only explanation was that I was a bitter teenager and I didn't want to be bothered with anything that wasn't my business. Later that night, after my parents came home, I was lying in bed when I once again heard the muffled screaming coming from behind the house. This time I could tell it was labored and ragged, and I can remember being annoyed, wishing that whoever it was would just shut up already. I didn't even mention it to my parents the next morning. So about a week goes by, and I have completely forgotten about the screaming I heard that night. I was outside throwing the football with my father, when the mailman stopped his truck and asked us if we had seen Mr. Fisher. Apparently he had not been collecting his mail. My father replied that he hadn't seen his car for a few days, and I remained silent. The mailman and my father walked down the driveway and knocked on Mr. Fisher's door. The next thing I remember were the sirens. An ambulance, a fire engine, and several police cars arrived. I spent most of that afternoon up in a tree, watching Mr. Fisher's house as law enforcement and paramedics went in and out. My father had found Mr. Fisher's front door unlocked. He had been lying in a crumpled heap at the bottom of his basement stairs. It appears that he had fallen and broken both of his legs. But it wasn't the fall that killed him. It was the rats. My father eventually told me that the coroner reported the man had been eaten alive while he was screaming for help, unable to climb back upstairs. He had defensive wounds all over his hands from swatting at them, and several dead rats were scattered around, but in the end, there had been too many of them to fight off. His face had sustained the worst damage. There was almost nothing left of it when they found him. The coroners were convinced that he had been alive through the worst of it. I felt as though I had been stabbed in the stomach and a wave of traumatizing guilt washed over me, and I broke down in tears. I still didn't tell my parents, but on the inside I was mortified. I felt like a criminal for ignoring those screams. And for weeks after that, I was convinced that the police were going to come back and arrest me for negligence or something. For about a year afterwards, it traumatized me, and I carried the guilt around in secret. I started doing drugs and drinking alcohol to try to dull the pain. In retrospect, I'm extremely lucky I graduated high school without overdosing, or killing someone while being drunk behind the wheel. I was about 20 years old when myself and 3 of my friends went back to the house in late October. The house had been repossessed by the bank at this point, and now sat condemned. Me and my friends sat on the front porch and shared a bottle of bourbon. My family almost considered this vacant house our second home, since it was so close to our property. My father would even do some yard work every once in a while, and make sure nothing was growing on the house. So like I said, my friends and I were drinking and smoking, and being belligerent idiots. Just talking shit and lying about girls that we had slept with. I got up and went around the back of the house to take a piss. I happened to crouch down and glance inside one of those low-to-the-ground basement windows, and just scanned the basement floor. All I could really see was a cracked cement floor, and loads of cobwebs crisscrossing the window. I took care of business, and was about to walk back around front, when I paused. Glancing back towards the window, I felt a sudden sensation that I was being examined. This time, there was something in the window that hadn't been there before. Very clearly, I could see the outline of an old bearded face and a single eye staring up at me, kind of at an angle, as if someone was lifting themselves up to peer out the window. I stared back, my body going numb and my mind going blank. I suppose that this is the part in horror stories where the people would say, "I felt a chill go down my spine," or "my blood ran cold." I didn't feel that way. I just went numb as I looked back at the figure in the window, the unmistakable feeling of being caught in an act washing over me, like I had been vandalizing the place or something. I believe the eye contact lasted for about 10 seconds, maybe slightly more, and I eventually just turned around and walked away. When I got to the front porch, I told my friends I was heading back to my garage. For a few short hours, I was convinced that it had been either a squatter or maybe my imagination. But that night I had the most horrific nightmare. I was trapped in a dark room with rats crawling all over me and gnawing at my face as I lay helpless. I woke up the next morning feeling sick. What bothered me the most was that whatever I had seen in the basement window, there had only been one eye visible, just like when I remember my old neighbor. It wasn't until I was about 30 years old that I had made peace with the fact that I had seen the man's spirit. He had been staring back at me in distress and confusion, wondering why I hadn't helped him. I have read several books on the paranormal, and I came to the conclusion that his spirit wasn't yet at peace. My parents eventually sold that house to me, and today I only use it as a summer home. But I've never wandered back to the old man's property again. Several times he's made his presence known. A few years ago I was jump-starting my car outside in the driveway, when suddenly 4 rats shot out from under the axle, between my legs, and scurried away towards Mr. Fisher's old home. Last year there was a soft knock on my window as I sat in my living room. And only a few months ago I was awoken from a deep sleep because I thought I could hear screaming from outside. My biggest fear now that I'm an adult is being alone and in pain, and having no one to come and aid me as I scream for help. I guess this is my way of finally getting it off my chest. When I go back there this summer, I plan on returning to Mr. Fisher's house. I will try my best to apologize to him, and I can only hope that this will finally put his spirit at rest.
This happened when I was 14 years old and staying at a friend's house. It was a cold, misty, moonless October Friday night. Halloween was upon us and all the usual pranks that come along with it. In the weeks up to that night, the usual pranks of knocking on doors and running, friends knocking on windows to scare you, stuff like that. But this night was different. This night is what nightmares are made of. Recently, my friend's sister, who for this story we'll call Jamie, was being harassed and stalked by some guy who she didn't know. We just came back from a haunted house. Then we turned on the TV and started to watch The Exorcist in the living room. It had to be around 11 or midnight, and the dog started to bark at the back door. So I went to see what she was barking at. Went back in the living room and continued to watch TV with my friend. Then all of a sudden, Jamie screamed from her room. We ran to see what was going on. Jamie said someone was knocking on her window and saw someone run to the back of the house. Just then, we heard someone trying to pry open the sliding back door. And when I ran in there, I saw someone standing there with a ski mask and hoodie on. His eyes were void of feeling, void of any sense of morality. I made sure the extra lock was set. And he seen me do this and started to bang on the glass. Then all of a sudden, he took off running. I asked my friend if the front door was locked, and a look of terror came over his face. He ran to lock the front door, then all of a sudden it swung slightly open. Luckily, he got there in time to stop it from opening completely. The intruder got his arm inside the door. He kept pushing it open ever so slightly, but my friend yelled for me to help as Jamie was frozen and frightened, screaming. I ran as fast as I could and slammed my shoulder into the door, smashing the intruder's arm in between the door and the door jamb. He jerked his arm out enough that we could close the door and lock it. The stalker was screaming and banging on the door, yelling over and over, "Jamie, I'm going to get you. If not tonight, it'll be another time. And I'm going to kill those kids for what they've done." I grabbed a baseball bat and my friend grabbed a shotgun out of the closet. We thought he was going to try and get back in. We called the police and waited what seems like hours before we went out to see if anyone was around. But all we found was handprints on windows and footprints in the mud leading to the backyard. The stalker's identity was never found out. And after that incident, Jamie was never bothered again. But after the incident, Jamie was never the same. She was quiet, distant, and it was hard for her to trust people. It took a long time for her to be herself again. It makes you think you never know who is watching you, who is following you in person or on social media. You don't know what their intent is, or if they have nefarious intentions. The world has become an information nightmare, and for that you never know who is spying, peeping, and lying, waiting to ambush you. You always have to be aware of your surroundings and ensure you are able to keep yourself safe. This happened 9 years ago when I was 15 years old. It was a Friday morning at school, and my friend told me that she would spend the night. Throughout the day, we spoke about what we could do for entertainment, but by the end of the day, she let me know that she couldn't stay for the night. On my way home, my mother texted me to let me know that I would be home alone tonight because she picked up a shift from 7 to 7. She was a nurse and that happened frequently. My mother started dinner while I was watching TV in the living room. But as I'm watching TV, I randomly look out of the window because I heard a car going down the street, and like I usually do, I look at it because we live right at the end of a dead-end street. This car didn't stop, it just circled around and crept down the street. About 30 minutes later, I saw the same car while I was watching TV. It did the same thing, went to the end of the street very slowly and turned around. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't really see how many people were in there. It was around 6:30 when my mother was walking out of the door. It was the winter time, so it was already dark outside, but it was unusually warm also. So I threw my mother's food away because it was trash, and she could never cook, and I made a few bags of popcorn. I was content with that. I laid on our couch, turned on movies, and started to text my friends. It also became hot in there, so I opened the window that was behind the couch. My mother hated when I opened it up because there's no screen, so I opened it up just a few inches and laid back down. A few minutes later, someone knocked at the door. As I'm getting up, I can hear about 3 people talking, only because my window was open, but I don't think they noticed it because it sounded like they were whispering in a way where they definitely did not want me to hear. I opened the door, expecting to see a few people, but to my surprise, I only saw one. Parked a few houses down, I saw the car that kept riding up and down the street. But anyways, when I opened the door, the man asked me was Daryl home. I said that no, Daryl lives here. Then he asked me were my parents home, and I said no, my mother's gone for the night. He said okay, with a smirk on his face. And he said sorry to bother you, and he left. I laid down, watching a few movies, then I dozed off. Maybe around midnight, I think. All of a sudden, I was awakened with a sound. I didn't know what it was. I looked at the clock and it said 3:02 a.m. Then I heard another noise. It was footsteps behind me outside of the window on my front porch. I continued to lay down flat on the couch. Then I stuck my head just above the back of the couch very slowly. I've never been so frightened in my life. There was a man pressing his face against my front window trying to look inside. I was frozen in fear. I don't think he could see me because I was right under him, and it was dark inside with the only light being my TV. Then the guy did something that almost made me scream. I laid flat again on the couch and the guy in the window said, "She's asleep right there. If she screams, I'll shut her up." He then started to lift the window. I ran in the kitchen to grab my mother's gun while he struggled with the window. As I'm running, I dialed 911 and put them on speaker. I explained the situation, ran to the window with the gun, pointed it and told them that I would shoot, and the police are on the way. The guy was halfway inside when I held the gun to him. He froze while the other guys ran off the porch. I made the guy stay there when the police were on the way. He was arrested and my mother never took a night shift again. At the same time, I'm glad my mother taught me what to do in those type of situations because it could have ended up a lot worse. This story happened August 14th, 2003, when I was 14 years old. I lived on a street that had a lot of boys on it. All of us were the same age and would frequently spend the night over each other's houses and simply just hang out. There were literally around 10 boys the same grade. It was a Thursday afternoon when 5 of my friends came over to hang out. We were all inside my room when all of a sudden the power went out. I yelled outside my window to tell my father because he was cutting our grass. I went to check the fuses, but the power never turned back on. All of my friends went home, and shortly after that, they all started calling me, telling me that their power was also out. So we all met outside and played football in the street. At this point, it was all 10 of us plus other kids. Once it started to become darker outside, we started to notice that it was a blackout, but we didn't know the severity of it. It was very hard to see, so we all grabbed flashlights and played hide and seek. We ran everywhere on our block. My parents rode down our street while we were playing, along with other parents. After a while, we saw some old guy walking down the street that we didn't know, but we didn't pay any attention to him. As it grew later, we all decided to go home. A few guys came to my house, but no one's parents were home. At least that's what I noticed. I don't think anyone else noticed it though. My friend across the street stayed home, so we all called him. He was telling me that he wished that his mother would stay out of his room. I asked him why did he say that. He said because when he went to his room, his underwear was dumped all on his bed everywhere. I said that's weird. Then he said I keep hearing her upstairs walking around the room. I told him that's impossible. Then me and a few of my friends got up and looked out of my window across the street at his room. I asked him does he still hear the footsteps, and he said yeah. Then we all saw someone walk across his window. It was that random guy we saw earlier. I told him that it's not his mom, and they get out of the house. Then we called our other friends, ran across the street and ran into the house. We beat the crap out of that guy and called the police. We come to find out that this guy had been arrested in the past for similar acts. Luckily, we saw him when we did, because who knows what would have happened. I've gotten Ubers plenty of times before, but this one experience I had a few years ago was the creepiest and weirdest of my life. It was a Saturday night, and I had been out bar hopping with my friends. It was around 1:30 a.m. when my friends and I decided to call it a night. I said goodbye to my friends as they walked to the bus stop. I live in the opposite direction, so I started walking to a spot where my brother was going to pick me up. But as I pulled my phone out, I received a text message from my brother telling me that he can't pick me up as he had been called in to work. He works nights. I opened up an Uber, and there was this one guy about 2 minutes away, so I clicked for him to pick me up. His name was Jim, and in his picture he was a balding middle-aged man with a mustache and some stubbled facial hair. An old car pulled up beside me. Jim looked out the window and confirmed that he was my Uber ride. Once I got inside, I noticed there was another person in the passenger seat. I said, "Oh, hi." They didn't reply to me. I asked Jim how his night was going. He didn't reply either. I was too drunk and too tired to care. Destination to my house was already on the app before I made the call for the Uber, so Jim started driving. I was scrolling through my phone and texting friends, and I started to hear Jim whisper and mumble to himself. I couldn't understand what he was saying, and if he was talking to me or the person next to him, but I ignored it. As we were driving, he started to become more on edge, and the things he was whispering to himself was becoming more coherent. One thing I heard Jim say in a loud whisper was, "You do it. I can't risk going back to jail." Even though I was drunk, that was enough for me to stop playing around on my phone and focus on my surroundings and keep a closer eye on Jim and the person next to him. The person hadn't said a word the whole time I was in the car, which I found weird. I looked around outside and we were on the freeway, which wasn't unusual as you had to take to get to my house. The next thing that happened is Jim pulled the car over at a rest stop. He once again started talking to himself. Jim then said, "I won't do it. You can't make me." He then hit the person next to him in the face, and he got out the car. He grabbed something from the trunk and walked off into the darkness. I was stunned with what was going on. I asked the person in the passenger seat if they were all right, but once again, they didn't say anything or do anything. I asked again, this time tapping him on the shoulder. Something didn't feel right after grabbing hold of him. It felt cold. I took a closer look at the person, and to my complete shock and horror, the man looked lifeless with a hoodie on, and with white and bluish purple type skin. The expression on his face was shocking. It was as if he were frightened to death. I sat back in the seat and couldn't believe what was going on. I could hear something from outside. It sounded like dirt being shoveled. That must have been what Jim was doing, digging some type of ditch or grave. At that point, I got out of the car and ran down the road, hoping to spot another car to pick me up. This was a sobering experience, but I was still drunk and tired. I ran down the road, but didn't get very far without being out of breath and needing to throw up. I'm not sure if I'm running around at night after drinking or the horrifying experience. Maybe both, but I felt sick. I turned around to look at Jim's car. I started to fear the worst when I saw the car start. I thought he was about to chase me down, but he didn't. He just started the car and then sped off into the night, never to be seen again. I felt so relieved, but I still kept fearing he would come back. I carried on walking down the road until passing the car, and they gave me a lift home. This incident scarred me for life. and I never got an Uber again. My name is Kyle, and I'm an Uber driver and have been for around 3.5 years. Most of the time I work from early evening to late at night. I've had my fair share of rude, weird, and awkward customers, but I never thought I would have my life threatened. I think it was a Thursday night about 10:30 p.m. I get an alert from a guy named Caleb, needing a ride to a house that was located in the countryside. I pull up to a guy wearing dark blue jeans, a black hoodie, old white sneakers, and a baseball cap. I roll my window down and ask if he's Caleb. He nodded yes and got in the back of my car. I looked at him in the rearview mirror. He was just looking out the window with his cap down and had both of his hands in his pockets of his hoodie. That was enough for me to know that he was interested in conversation, and the destination was already set up as I picked him up, so there was no need to make small talk either. As we were nearing the house, he sat forward and started looking out of the window, like he was looking for something or someone in particular. He was looking around the quiet, dark forest area, as was I. I then heard something thud on the floor of my car. Caleb then picked it up, whatever it was, and put it back in his pocket. But I took a look in the rearview mirror and saw that it was a gun. The butt of a handgun was sticking out of his pocket. I looked at Caleb to see if he noticed me looking at him, but he was still looking out of the window. My heart started racing and I began to panic. I was thinking like I was about to get killed and needed to think quickly on how I'm going to get out of this situation. We pulled up to an abandoned cottage that had been vandalized and forgotten about for years. And outside were 3 hooded men standing around a barrel with a fire inside. Before I had a chance to do anything, Caleb leaned forward, pointed the gun in the back of my neck, and grabbed the keys from my car, turning off the engine. At that point, the 3 men turned toward the car and started slowly approaching. I thought I was about to get robbed, beaten, or even worse, killed. Caleb then said, "Don't move," as he got out of the car. He approached the 3 men and started talking. One of the men then handed him something. I don't know what it was. I couldn't make it out. But shortly after that, talking turned into arguing. And it wasn't long before Caleb shot one of the men dead, before the other 2 ran off into the dark woods. Caleb then turned to me, pointed the handgun, and fired, causing the window to shatter. Thankfully, I wasn't hit. Another gunshot went off, coming from the woods. Caleb turned toward the sound of the gunshot and let off 2 more rounds before running off into the woods himself. I grabbed my phone and ran out of the car into the opposite direction. When I thought I was far enough away, I called the police. As I was running, I could still hear gunshots in the distance. I told the police to go to the address. I still had it on my phone, so I knew exactly where to send them. 2 police cars drove by, and one of them stopping for me as I was waving them down. I told them I was the one who called. I was taken back to the station to make a more official statement. I was also informed that the cottage was abandoned and found no one near the property in the woods. The only thing they found was my car and the shattered window. The police told me it was a drug deal gone bad, and I should be considered lucky that I wasn't killed. My name is Ed. I'm 25 years old, and I'm an Uber driver. This story happened about 4 months ago. It was late on a Friday night around 11 p.m., and I was doing my pickups around local bars and nightclubs. I had just finished dropping off some passengers when I got a notification from a guy named Jackson. I pulled up to his location when a man peered through my window asking if I was Ed, his Uber driver. I said, "Yeah, you Jackson?" He replied, "Yeah," and got in. Once he got in my car, I could see him more clearly. He had long, dirty blonde hair, an unshaven face, and red bags under his eyes. He was wearing jeans and a dark blue hoodie. I started driving toward the destination that he had marked down. It wasn't long before I could smell his foul odor. I took a few glances at him in the rearview mirror He looked pretty paranoid. He kept looking around outside as if he was searching for someone. The place he was driving to was a bar on the quieter part of the town, in fact. I thought the bar was shut down, but I didn't want to ask and make conversation with this guy, as I didn't feel comfortable. He didn't say anything at the start of the journey. He was just looking around, as I mentioned before. He kept taking sips of some kind of liquor he had with him. It was when we started to get to the quiet, empty highway when he started talking. He was saying things like, life is precious, and always be careful because you could lose someone close to you. I wasn't sure if he was even talking to me. I just assumed he was. He then showed me a picture of a woman and a young girl. He said that was his wife and daughter. I awkwardly said, "You have a nice family." He then asked if I had a daughter. I said yes, but I don't really. I don't know why I said yes, but thank God I did, because at that point, Jackson told me to stop the car. As I was stopping the car, he wrapped his arm around my throat and pointed something in the back of my head. It was a gun. He told me to go home to my daughter and be thankful. As he said this, he passed me the photo of his wife and daughter. He then got out of the car and fled into the darkness of the night. I then drove to the police station and reported what had happened. What they told me made the incident 10 times scarier than what it already was. After showing them the photo, the man had handed to me. The police told me that the man had killed a woman and her daughter hours earlier, and the police were out looking for him. Thinking about this story horrifies me. I think about a lot of things. That I had a sadistic maniac in my car. Now he murdered that woman and child. I also think about how I told him I had a daughter. I honestly think if I hadn't, he would have killed me. He wouldn't be here to tell this story. As far as I know, the police still haven't found Jackson. And he's still out there somewhere.
I mentioned in a previous post that for a good week, my car was in the shop getting fixed. This resulted in me lifting just about everywhere and having to deal with a lot of weirdos. Now, I already thought that the last Lyft driver I had was already pretty bad, but this guy takes the creepy cake. I had just finished my shift and this dude picks me up by the name of Angel. But anyways, as I get in the back seat of his car, he pulls up my Lyft photo and then zooms in on it repeatedly before he stares at me in the rearview mirror.
"This is you?"
He asks. Yeah.
No way. How old are you? You look so cute. How old are you?"
As he says this, he keeps pulling up my Lyft photo. I'm 22.
"What? How old were you when you took this photo? You look like a child. You're so cute. Wow."
In my head, I was just like, 2 years ago, get off my butt. But instead, I didn't really answer and just kind of brushed him off. He continues driving, all the while staring at me whenever he can. We get to a red light and he changes the radio station from Katy Perry to the Spanish channels. I instantly groan inside because I'm mixed race and this is getting pretty old for me. A lot of people do this thing to me where they try and see if I can speak their language or know enough about their culture, as if to approve me or something.
"You speak Spanish? You know this song? This is real Spanish music. You should give it a listen."
No, I don't speak Spanish, thanks.
"Do you know any Spanish artists?"
No, I don't.
"Well, that's okay. Even if you don't speak Spanish, you'll do good on your honeymoon."
I ask what he means by that, and he doesn't really give me an answer. Instead, he asks what my work schedule's like, how many days a week I work, is it always at that location, do I live alone, etc. I answer him instead in half-truths, saying, "Oh, I don't have a schedule yet or a fixed location as I'm training between locations." That way he can't really find me or know my routine at all. He just nods and hums, all the while still just glancing at me right in the mirror. A car cuts him off and then he honks before stating loudly,
Move! Move! I have a really pretty girl in the backseat of my car.
I tell him to let me out of the corner, and he says no, that he'll take me to my door. Because I don't want it to be too obvious that I'm freaked out, I tell him to go up to these random townhouses which are all connected by a path and park. He lets me out at the front of some random house, and I move behind it and then wait until he drives off before I zigzag around all of these pathways. I mean, hell, I almost got lost myself by walking around all these weird pathways until I finally found myself home. So yeah, Angel, let's definitely not encounter each other again. Me and my girlfriend were in a city in Texas right off the highway, and we stopped at a tiny little gas station to get some beer and chips and such. For some reason, when we pulled in, I felt the need to say, I actually think I need to come in with you this time. Which was really weird because I usually always stay in the car whenever we go places, or if I do get out, I don't ever feel the need to announce it. When we walked in, everything felt normal. We were kind of just laughing and joking around about the half-naked Modelo girl cutout had a super pixelated face. We then started looking at all of the beer, and I was being really indecisive, but could tell that we were both getting really sketched out, so I just grabbed 2 coconut margarita type drinks without even thinking about it and rushed to the counter, thinking that we needed to get out of there really quickly. There was this growing feeling of being watched. It was like pure malice that I haven't felt before. I can't really describe it. There was an old Hispanic man leaning on the ice cream cooler right by the counter and pretty much watching every customer. Everything just felt slow. It's hard to explain. When I put my things on the counter, the man started smiling at us really wide and then started talking in a very strange manner. It was like he was trying to be charming or personable, but really just came off as really creepy. Outside the door, I could see a man in a red jacket also just staring through the doors, just watching and waiting. It was pretty obvious now. These men were waiting for us. It's really hard to explain the overwhelming feeling of dread that we had, and I didn't really talk about it until we were driving out of the parking lot. The man in the red jacket was still circling the building and watching us as the car drove off. The city we were in, it has a pretty bad reputation for having a lot of human trafficking victims coming in and out, and I honestly think that they were just waiting to find the perfect victim. I honestly think that if I hadn't gone in with my girlfriend when I did, she probably would have been taken, or maybe they would have taken me from the car. I've never had such an intense looming feeling of doom and paranoia in my life. It seems very mundane, but it was definitely a very close call. We kept discussing it the rest of the night. We're really lucky that we went in together and got out as quick as we could. I mean, who knows what could have happened. The story happened a couple of years ago after a breakup. I had a little time to myself and I just wanted to meet new people. Not necessarily to hook up, but just go on dates. Here enters JB. Seems nice enough, and we met at the nearest city. We had a pretty good date, and I say goodbye. We make some more arrangements to hang out, and eventually we end up back at his flat in an area of a city that I knew quite well, as I lived there as a student. So I felt pretty confident and comfortable that his flatmates would also be home, and that I wouldn't be completely alone with them. We're sitting downstairs watching The Office when his flatmates come home, and they're making their meals, and then he suggested finishing watching an episode upstairs before I left for the bus. Well, he has the smallest room with a single bed and no chairs. He lays down on the bed and I sit on the end of it. He encourages me to move up, and I awkwardly do just that. He says that he can't see, so to lie down. So I lie down on the bed pretty uncomfortably, but try to think logically, and we hadn't even kissed yet, so I mean, what could really happen? Right at that moment, I really wish that I had just left. Without even a cuddle or anything, the guy just grabs my arm and then tries to shove my hand down his shorts. Nope. Luckily for me, I was kind of clutching my handbag pretty close-ish, and I just flipped out of the bed into a standing position, threw my bag over me, and then ran downstairs, with him saying,
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Please don't leave.
He had no shoes on and he didn't know that I used to live in the city. I was so out of there and down a different street that we had come down earlier. I was totally freaking out at the bus stop and on the phone trying to get a lift home before he finds me. I finally make it home and no, I never see him again. I never saw him again, but make no mistake, that wasn't the last time I heard from him. He went mighty quiet after I ignored his messages begging for me to meet up with him again. I spied on his Facebook when he did go quiet, just a little curious. And he had just moved in with a girlfriend. I mean, this was mere weeks after the event. Who moves in with someone that quick? Or maybe he was already seeing her. I guess I'll never really know. Cue about 6 months and nothing. I hadn't been on Plenty of Fish for a while after that. And then in January, I get a message from him. He split with his girlfriend and he just wants to meet, chat, and have a coffee with me. Being a little bit lonely, I kinda thought about it. I agreed, but I said that we could only meet in public. He agrees. We make plans on that evening and I'm leaving work and he says that he can't make it and that I should just meet him at his place. Nope. I decline and I go straight home. This goes on for a further 6 months and him badgering and guilting me into saying that I'd meet him at a coffee place and then him changing the plans last minute, then me canceling. This probably sounds like nothing until about June, when I'd been messaging my friend who had lived the next town over. Let's call my friend M. M had a really psycho ex-girlfriend that he had told me all about, and M had a very normal name, but it was spelled pretty unusual, at least to me anyway. So one evening I'm chilling at home and I get a WhatsApp from a number that I don't recognize, and it's mentioned M and the way that his name is spelled. I obviously freak out and I then tell M that I think his crazy ex had sent me a message. Unfortunately, I've totally forgotten what the threatening message actually was, just that I was really freaked enough to ask who it was, and I then get a message back.
You know. M knows.
So M freaks out and I keep getting calls from this number into the early hours and the caller kept hanging up whenever I answered. I suffered from anxiety at the time and the next morning I was a total wreck. I went to work and got another slew of random calls. Later that night, I decided to tell my cousin everything that happened and she called from her phone. Guess whose voicemail she got? Yes, JB. She leaves him a message saying to not contact me ever again or else the police will be involved. I check his Facebook a little while later and he's apparently moving back to his home country. Hopefully I'll never meet him again. This probably wasn't the most scary or creepy encounter, but it was really playing on my mind and it really creeped me out.
I remember this like it was yesterday. My brother and I were home alone for the night while our parents went out with their friends. He's 17 and I'm 13. My brother left soon after my parents, even though he was supposed to stay home. Recently, a new neighbor just moved in next door, some old guy. I saw him speaking with our parents the first day at his house. Anyway, we live in Florida and it was the wintertime, so it wasn't too cold. I say this because we have a pool in our backyard that's heated and I love swimming. At around 10:30 p.m. I decided to go swimming. I called my friend to let him know, so he said he'll come over. He only lives about a street away. I started to swim some laps and as I come up for some air, I saw the old man from next door standing on the outside of our fence leaning against the gate with the creepiest smile on his face. I lost all form in my swimming strokes and completely stopped. I played it cool and I said hi. He didn't even say hi, he went straight to, I noticed that your parents aren't home. I told him that my older brother is, and he then said, nah, he's not. I didn't see him when I was watching you through your bedroom window. I didn't say anything. I was just shocked. He opened up the gate and started to speed walk toward me. I began to back up in order to climb out of the pool while yelling help. He was getting closer, then he stopped and looked behind me. My friend was on the other side of the fence running toward us, and also on the phone with the cops. My neighbor ran into his house. The cops came, but the old man denied everything. He didn't know that my friend recorded him before he called the cops. He was arrested and eventually moved away. I don't know what his plan was, but I'm glad my friend showed up. Obviously, my parents were pissed at my brother for leaving when he was supposed to stay at home to watch me. But they were happy I was okay. To this day, I haven't seen that guy since. While in college, I love finding snakes. So a friend of mine from the herpetology club, he showed me this road that he would cruise for snakes. Cruising is when you drive slowly down the old back roads, after dark, looking for snakes that have slithered onto the warmer road they heat up. The road we took was about 4 miles and had around 4 houses on it. We had taken a few laps on this road, and we were making our final pass. There are 2 houses near the beginning of the road, one at the end and one near the middle. We were getting close to the center when we see movement on the left side of the road. There are a lot of animals on this road, so we weren't surprised to see this. However, what shoots out is this kid, probably around 8 or 9, torn blue jeans and a ripped dark t-shirt. He takes one look at us. In his face is a mix of fear and pain. He looked back really quick from where he had come out of, then booked it across the road. The guy I'm with, he gets out of the car chasing to see if he's all right, and I pull the car up to the point where the boy went into the woods. I'm starting to get out of the car when my friend walks back quickly, and he just says, "Let's go now." We hop in the car and tear out of there. He says there's a graveyard about 10 yards into the woods where the boy had ran, and it was 5 gravestones with the same death date. They all had the same last name, and one was a boy who was 9. We never came back for the rest of the summer to that road. We usually would go out once or twice a week, but not anymore. The next year when my friend had graduated, I took my girlfriend out to that road. We had gone early to try and find different types of snakes, because different snakes tend to move at different times of the day. We got to the house near the graveyard, and there's 3 men doing some yard work. I rolled down the window and I explained what I was doing and asked them about the graveyard. Apparently their dad's brother's family had all died, and their space heater caught on fire around 20 years ago. I kept pushing and asking them about it, and they told me the firemen or whoever does it have found all the bodies in the rubble except for the youngest son, but they assumed he was too far burned. I asked if they had a little brother, and the 6'4", 250-pound man said he was the youngest. When I gave the description of the kid I saw, they all went white. They all have, individually seen the kid I was talking about, and he always runs into the gravesite. I have never been on that road again. Honestly, I have no plans on going back. I'm not too fond of the paranormal. My aunt and uncle moved into a new house. I was staying with them for a week, but I got a weird vibe about their house. I was sleeping in the attic, and around 3 a.m., I woke up to find my 6-year-old cousin standing next to my bed staring at me. He just started telling me about his imaginary friend, Maury. The next day, when I asked his parents about it, they told me he didn't have an imaginary friend, and they said he never had one in their previous house. They decided to ask him about it, but he said he had no idea what they were talking about. The next night, around 3 a.m., I woke up again to find my little cousin staring right at me. He kept repeating over and over, "Why did you tell? Why did you tell? Why did you tell?" I tried to talk to him and he started telling me about how Maury would appear in his dreams at night to eat dinner with his family when they were at the table. I asked him how he met Maury, and he told me that Maury came to him and asked him if he can come inside of him. He said, yeah, sure, come in. That's when Maury started to come beside his bed every night to talk to him. The next day, I told his parents, but they didn't believe me. They thought I was making it up. On my final night in the house, I was awoken by a faint thumping under my bed. At this point, I was very scared, but I worked up the courage to peek under my bed. I found my little cousin hiding under there. He said he was protecting me. He told me that Maury couldn't trust me and he wants me gone, and that Maury won't hurt me if he's there to protect me. Then he started going back and forth with someone who wasn't there, moving around like he was wrestling with someone. Then I heard the words, "Kill him." It was a deep, raspy voice that I've never heard before. Those were the last words I heard him say. I ran faster than I ever have before and made it at least 3 blocks down the road before my aunt and uncle caught up with me and begged me to come back. They asked me what had happened, and when I told them, again, they didn't believe me. When we walked back to the house and went upstairs, my cousin was in his bed, sound asleep. I left the next morning and never went back. That was a very creepy experience in my life. Very creepy. And I can't compare it to any other experience ever. And it's extremely difficult for me to talk about because I really don't know what was going on. My cousin doesn't remember while my aunt and uncle still don't believe me. At the same time, my cousin has always been weird ever since that day. And he doesn't make a lot of friends. I don't know. I figured that I'll get this story out there to other people so I won't keep it bottled up inside. To add to that, I've never been back to my cousin's house because I don't trust him, I don't trust my aunt, and I don't trust my uncle. Something's up with that family and it isn't something good. Just be careful of the company you keep. Whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, just always be careful, because you never know the intentions of people around you.